Cup. I'm Mike Penna of the Horse Racing Radio Network, alongside my usual entry mates, retired trainer Jude Feld, who spent about 20 years training here in Southern California, and former jockey, now racehorse owner Jeff Bloom, who is wearing his special Breeders' Cup cap. He is one of the cool kids here at Breeders' Cup Week because he actually has a horse in the Breeders' Cup this year, and maybe even two horses. We're going to tell you more about that as we welcome you for the very first time in the history of the Breeders' Cup to Del Mar in Southern California. This is a venue that is an oceanside venue where the turf meets the surf is the slogan. Majestic views of the sunset, beautiful beaches, and, yeah, a few Torrey pines sprinkled in for good measure, too. And we're happy to have you with us for the first of 4 Breeders' Cup shows as we bring you our Breakfast at Breeders' Cup programs, looking at workouts of all the top contenders on the track. We'll talk about those. We'll be joined by special guests for interviews. And, guys, when you think about what this venue represents and what racing in Southern California represents, this is an iconic place to hold the Breeders' Cup, and it's nice to see it here. You know, Del Mar opened its doors in 1937, 80 years ago, and Jude, pretty special place.
Yeah, it's a place that I've loved my whole life. I've been waiting for this event to be run at Del Mar since the inception in 1984, and right now we're looking at Gunrunner on the racetrack. He's got the gold saddle towel with the 105 on it, and he's supposed to breeze here shortly. He looks fantastic galloping around.
Yeah, he represents a classic East versus West showdown in this year's Breeders' Cup Classic as he takes on defending champion Arrowgate, and Gunrunner has been in unbelievable form this year, Jeff.
Well, he really has, and he's risen right to the top, deservedly so, with his body of work currently coming into the Breeders' Cup Classic. And I will tell you this, the connections involved with Gunrunner trainer Steve Asmussen and assistant trainer Scott Blasey couldn't be more happy with how well the horse is trained. She's shipping out to California. This will be his first breeze over the Del Mar main track. He's had a chance to train over the main track, galloping a couple of miles each day. And right now his exercise rider, Angel, I'm forgetting his last name for a moment, who gets on this horse regularly, has got a real strong hold, just a super long hold at the back of the horse's neck. You can see he's got his feet in the bike, so to speak. His feet wedged pretty tightly in the irons. And really what they're looking for here, I think, is just something like an easy half mile in, say, 51 seconds, which means he'll probably go in 49 seconds or something like that.
Jude, watching this as a former trainer, what are you looking for in this gallop here, this little bit of a work here from Gunrunner?
Well, Steve never works his horses very fast, so
yeah.
I would imagine he just wants a nice, easy little breeze. He's going really nicely so far, hitting the ground good, and he's got a little sweat on his neck. He's actually doing something. It gets a little muggy here at Del Mar, so it's nothing to be concerned about. But that was a nice, easy breeze, and the guy did a great job with him.
I think you would give this breeze an A+. We're not talking about the speed of the work, but what they were looking to accomplish here Monday before the big race on Saturday, just a way for this horse to stretch his legs, to get a little bit of air into his lungs, but more so really just to kind of bounce off that surface. And I think, when you look at all the horses that are shipping in and getting a chance to travel over this main track, probably none other than Gunrunner getting over it as good as he is. I mean, he's just really skipping along over the surface. And what's so nice about this workout, they wanted to go easy. Gunrunner's got so much class. He wants to do more, but he and his rider communicate so well together. Like right now they're pulling up, and this horse really is full of himself, but at the same time he's listening to his rider, allowing himself to ease into a nice little hobby horse, and he'll be jogging here in just a moment.
Yeah, a lot of controlled energy.
Huh? Yeah, what a great way to begin this first breakfast at the Breeders' Cup program, getting a look at Breeders' Cup Classic contender Gunrunner. Does he go as the favorite in there, or is it Arrowgate who maybe gets a little more money in the wagering?
I don't know. I think
Gunrunner is the favorite.
I think a lot of people are on the Gunrunner bandwagon. I don't know if that's justified, but I do think he's got the fan base behind him right now.
Well, for those of you just tuning in, this is the first of 4 Breakfast at the Breeders' Cup programs we're going to bring your way over the course of the next 4 mornings here at Del Mar. 13 championship races set to be contested beginning on Friday, with purses totaling more than $28 million. Now, 4 races will be run on Friday, 9 races on Saturday, and as part of that coverage, you'll be able to watch it on NBC television. You'll also be able to hear it worldwide on the Horse Racing Radio Network at horseracingradio.net and SiriusXM satellite radio. Pre-entries were taken this past week, past Monday. 187 horses were pre-entered into the Breeders' Cup World Championships. That included a record 46 entrants from overseas. 9 of those are previous Breeders' Cup winners, including the aforementioned Arrowgate, who is back to defend his title in the Breeders' Cup Classic. So it promises to be an amazing couple of days, and we're happy to have you with us each and every morning here at BreedersCup.com and HorseRacingRadio.net. JT, By the Moon, Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint contender, now on the track, and she's getting ready to do her thing here this morning.
Yeah, she looks really happy. Samantha Siegel's fine filly. I believe she's won 3 races in a row, but one of them being Grade 1. So she's coming up to this race in great shape. She's in the best form of her life, a very talented filly, and she is just having a great old time out there.
She just arrived here. Michelle Nevin's sort of way of handling things, I think, is coming in on top of the race, or as close to the race as she can. So they're not going to do a whole heck of a lot with this filly, I'm sure. She's got her regular exercise rider on her that's been getting on her for as long as I can remember. And, I think one of the benefits for By the Moon, not only is she in good form right now, but the 7-furlong distance of the filly and mare sprint is probably going to be very much to her liking.
Yeah, and I said she was getting ready to do her thing. She was just finishing up after completing those preparations here this morning. So By the Moon now leaving the racetrack. There's another look at Gunrunner, who you just saw go through his workout here on this Monday morning. And Jude, as a trainer, you're watching your horse go through these preparations, and you're getting so close to the big day. You've done everything you can possibly do. What are these mornings like every time that you give that exercise rider a leg up and send that horse to the track?
Well, you just want everything to work out good. You want your horse to come back in good shape, and it looks like Gunrunner is no worse for wear here. He's striding right out, going back to the barn. I thought his training this morning was spectacular. He'll probably get tomorrow off. I don't know what the pattern is with this horse. Sometimes they get to feeling so good they want to take him out and do a little something with him the day after work. Some trainers just walk him, but now the less training you do, the better, because there's less risk when you go to the track. So I imagine he'll probably have tomorrow off and then jog the next day and then gallop after that, depending on whatever his regular schedule is. But he looks perfect.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is most of the horses here who have either been here for the last few days or are just now arriving, most of the heavy lifting is done. Now it's just a matter of let's let these horses get acclimated to the new surroundings, maybe take them on a stroll through the paddock, let them get a chance to see what that's going to look like for them in the afternoon, let them stretch their legs a little bit more, let them get a feel for the track, let them get used to the pony horse that's taking them out on the track. But they're fit, they're ready. You just want to make sure that nothing really goes wrong at this point, and you kind of put the bubble wrap on them and get them into the starting gate.
Let's spend a little time talking about the venue here, Del Mar, because as I mentioned, this is the first time the Breeders' Cup has come here to Del Mar in the 34-year history. It's the 13th time the Breeders' Cup has been held in California. And Jeff, you've been here, you've raced horses here, you've ridden here, Jude, you've trained here. What is it about this particular surface and this particular racetrack that makes it so unique?
Well, I think more than anything, first and foremost, Jude kind of alluded to it in the beginning, is the setting and the ambiance of Del Mar, and especially for those of us who grew up here in and around the area and got to experience racing at Del Mar. And don't forget, over the years, beginning back, if you look back to 1937, so many incredible horse careers were launched here. Because of the time of the year for the summer meet at Del Mar, many of the 2-year-olds that go on to be either champion or make noise in next spring's Triple Crown run launch their careers here at Del Mar. And so it's the West Coast version of the best of racing relative to our industry. And so what made the Breeders' Cup happen here finally is the fact that they were able to widen the turf course. And without getting that done, the Breeders' Cup was never going to come to Del Mar. Once they were able to get that done, that changed everything. And so I think that it's a wonderful thing that the Breeders' Cup did finally come out here to Del Mar, and certainly hard to argue with the great setting. The weather conditions are perfect for horses and for the connections involved. And so the track's different than any other track, like all tracks are, somewhat similar to the surface at Santa Anita, because they went out and sort of mixed the same kind of composite for the dirt track so that the horses in Southern California wouldn't be having too much of a variation. It's going to be a new surface for many of the ship-ins. It's going to be different for them. Some horses will like it, some horses won't. But that old saying, good horses usually will run over any surface.
Yeah, the other thing is I think a lot of people don't realize Del Mar used to be kind of a minor track in the overall scheme of things. A lot of the California-based jockeys that raced at Santa Anita and Hollywood Park would go to Saratoga in the summertime, and Del Mar was kind of relegated to a B-track status for many, many years. I often tell people that I ran 14 horses the first meet I was here full time and never finished out of the money, and my total purse earnings were $15,000. The purses weren't great a long time ago, but through the years it's grown in stature, and Joe Harper's done a fabulous job, and Tommy Robbins, the men that have worked here have developed this into a first-class, top-class racing venue. It's a place that people love to come and race because of the beautiful area, the fantastic beaches. The Del Mar beaches are among the best in the world, and you know it's a fabulous venue, and that's why Breeders' Cup is here finally. It's finally grown into itself, Del Mar. It's become a destination, and now it's set for the best.
Getting a live look at the tabulator, who is one of the contenders for this year's Breeders' Cup Juvenile. He's a winner of the Grade 3 Iroquois at Churchill Downs on September 16th. Pretty versatile, too. His 3 career victories have come at 3 different racetracks and at 3 different distances, and that has to help his chances when you look at a race like the Juvenile and making a trip here to Del Mar for the first time.
Yeah, I think you make a good point there, Mike, especially with these young horses. What you want to see is as much experience and seasoning as you can, because they are shipping to a new venue. You're going to have different conditions, and a lot of times it's not so much the talent or abilities of the horse with these young horses, but it's how they react or respond to change. And so the fact that this horse has already proven he can handle going to a new venue and actually win, in fact, this horse has yet to lose, is a good sign. And, you know, what we're seeing here with the tabulator this morning, just kind of an easy sort of jog around the track. And I think for the most part, leading up to this Friday and Saturday, most of the exercise we're going to see is going to be somewhat mild.
He is the 3rd Breeders' Cup starter and the 2nd in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile for trainer Larry Rivelli. You remember he sent out Cocked and Loaded, who was 5th in 2015. Jude, we had a chance to visit with Larry Rivelli not too long ago on our Horse Racing Radio Network program, and he was such a delight to talk to because he's so positive when he talks about the sport of thoroughbred racing, and he is an interesting individual. He's a native of Illinois. He grew up wanting to be a professional football player, and he played college football at a very high level, realized, you know what, I'm not going to be that good, and I love horse racing. Let me go back to doing what I love. And so that's how he became a trainer, and here he is with a horse yet again in the Breeders' Cup.
Yeah, he's a very successful trainer. He does a great job with his horses. They always look fantastic. I mean, look at this horse. Look at that rear end. You just want to kiss it, you know. It's so big, and it's fantastic. And this horse is wearing blinkers, the tabulator, and you can see why, because he's kind of looking around. He's actually looking around the blinkers. Jeff might be able to talk about that, having been on a lot of horses, but he obviously needs to concentrate a little bit.
Yeah, and that's one of those things. I mean, it's kind of interesting because here's a horse that's already been to a number of different venues, yet, you know, he's here sort of looking around. And, you know, these horses are young, they're inexperienced, and they're feeling good. And as you know, Jude, with the blinkers, it's always a fine line. What's the right mix? Is it a cheater blinker that just has a tiny bit of cup that keeps the horse focused, or is it a full cup because when you're on the horse is looking at you, it's looking at the grandstand, it's looking at the cigarette that's on the ground. So, you know, blinkers make, in some cases, a huge difference with horses, and other times, you know,
it works against them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so trainers will, though, experiment quite a bit with the size of the cup on the actual blinkers, but last few days leading up to a big race like this, I'm sure there's not going to be a whole lot of change with the size of the blinkers.
Here's Sharp Azteca, a contender for the Las Vegas Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. That will be contested on Friday. And Sharp Azteca comes out of a huge victory, 1-4 in the Grade 2 Kelso at Belmont. That was at the 1 mile distance that he will compete at on Friday afternoon. And, guys, he's as honest as they come. He's had 14 lifetime starts. He's won 7 of those, 4 seconds and a third. He's earned more than $1.1 million. He's very, very dangerous on Friday.
He's very fast. He's out for a little jog this morning, and seems like he's feeling well. He's out there bouncing up and down.
And his saddle towel is under the saddle, which I don't know if you saw any of the photos taken, but I think it was his first day out here at Del Mar, and somehow or other the saddle stayed on the horse, and the pad and the saddle towel went flying behind him, and didn't seem to bother him at all.
That was an amazing photo that Barbara
Livingston
Livingston took. Of course, she is amazing. Somebody insulted her by saying she's always in the right place at the right time, but she just has a knack. I think that it wasn't accidental that she caught that and other people didn't.
Or she wasn't the one who loosened the saddle tail so that she could get the perfect shot.
Oh man, now he sounds like a horse player. I'm getting a little worried. Conspiracy theories.
Sorry, Barbara, just kidding.
One of the horses that's going to try to dethrone Arrowgate and knock off Gunrunner is Gunrunner, who is on the track right now. You're getting a look at him. He is trained by Antonio Sano, and Antonio, a great story. In his native Venezuela, he was actually kidnapped, not once, but twice. And yeah, here he is with a contender in the Breeders' Cup, and his only other starter in the Breeders' Cup, Antonio's, was fourth in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf in 2013. So looking for better results with Gunrunner. And one thing you can say about Gunrunner, and this is a horse that people became familiar with throughout the road to the Kentucky Derby and throughout the Triple Crown, this is a horse that can finish. And one thing we know about Gunrunner is he will be running at the end.
Yeah, he's been training very well, too. Antonio Sano's taken to Twitter a lot like our current president, and not quite at that level, but he's been bragging about this horse quite a bit and how good he's doing. He looks very happy this morning and just very calm and relaxed. That's a good sign, I think, because sometimes he has a tendency to get a little keyed up.
Jude, as a trainer, what about the 3-year-olds this time of year? We're almost in November already, and now we have these 3-year-olds that went through the Triple Crown run, and they're going to meet up with some of these old pros, the older horses. Is that an issue, or are we late enough in the year? If it's a good enough horse, it's really irrelevant.
Yeah, I think if it's a good enough horse, it's really irrelevant, but I think you have to consider it. I mean, the older horses seem to have an edge, not only, in size and shape, but maybe in a little toughness too. When you run against the older horses, a lot of them are really seasoned against top competition, and these horses are stepping into a new dimension, so they have to improve a little bit just to stay even.
We were there to broadcast the Travers Stakes at Saratoga on August 26th, and that was a race that was won by 3-year-old West Coast, who is one of 5 horses entered into this year's Classic by Hall of Famer Bob Baffert. West Coast, very, very dangerous in the Classic this year, but Gunrunner was runner-up to West Coast that day. He went off at 24-1 in the Travers, put in that huge late run, and if he can repeat that effort, well, he might even have to do a little bit better because he still has to get by West Coast, but if he puts in that same type of effort here at Del Mar, look, it's not inconceivable to think that Gunrunner could be the one draped in the purple garland after the race.
Well, he not only has to get by West Coast, but he's got to get by Arrowgate and Gunrunner. And
okay, so maybe it is a little more inconceivable.
He's got to get by the Baffert. Baffert's probably only running 4, so he's got to get by those 4. It's a very tough spot for the 3-year-olds, but Gunrunner certainly is in good form, and you could make a case for him,
It's a good point because he does have Cupid entered too as his 5th horse that he entered, but Cupid is also cross-entered into the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. He has first preference into the Dirt Mile, meaning more than likely that's the spot that we'll see Cupid. So you're right, Baffert likely to have 4 horses going as he looks to win a 4th consecutive Breeders' Cup Classic. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, the guy's in rarefied air. I mean, he's the top trainer on the West Coast for sure, and then he could arguably be the top trainer in the nation.
You've often maintained that Bob became an even better trainer after he got into the Hall of Fame.
Yes, I tease him about that.
Yeah,
sometimes.
You do. And what is it about Bob Baffert that just makes him so good and so good consistently?
He's a tremendous manager of horses. First of all, he's a good horseman. Let's get that out of the way. The guy knows horses, but he's a tremendous manager. He picks unbelievable spots for his horses, and his horses are very good, but when you have a very good horse and a guy that's a good horseman and he's tremendous at picking spots for his horses, almost unbeatable.
Well, Bob grew up in Nogales, Arizona, and currently has 14 Breeders' Cup victories to his credit, and that is just 6 shy of Hall of Famer D. Wayne Lucas, who holds the record at 20. You have to think that at some point, it won't be this year, but at some point that Bob's going to surpass that mark, and he's going to be the all-time leading trainer in Breeders' Cup history.
Yeah, you would think so. I mean, he's certainly loaded for bear. Look how many horses he's got entered overall in this Breeders' Cup. I mean, and they're all major contenders. He doesn't have anybody that he's just running, for a ham sandwich.
We mentioned Cupid and Arrowgate. His other contenders, by the way, in the Breeders' Cup Classic are Collected, who won the Pacific Classic right here at Del Mar, upsetting Arrowgate. He has Moop Tahij, who won the Awesome Again Stakes at Santa Anita on September 30th. And he also has the 3-year-old West Coast, who we mentioned earlier. So those are the contenders that Bob will send out in this year's Classic.
Yeah, I mean, this is the age of the super trainers that tend to have the right ties to the connections that provide them with the kind of horses that run in these Breeders' Cup races. But what's really remarkable for this year's edition of the Breeders' Cup, is the fact that Bob Baffert has so many of his horses in the Breeders' Cup Classic. I mean, we all know how difficult it is to have horses ready to run at that level at the right time, but to have so many of them peaking at that time and to be able to compete against each other in a race like the Breeders' Cup Classic is truly remarkable.
When you talk about top trainers in the sport, another name that comes to mind is trainer Mark Cassie, and he's going to be represented by a good one in the Breeders' Cup Mile in World Approval. And we're getting a look now at all the contenders for the Breeders' Cup Mile. World Approval, since cutting back to the 1 mile distance earlier this season, has been absolutely unbeatable. He's been lights out, and you have to think that he is maybe the horse to beat in that race. Am I going too far in saying that?
Well, you've got some European horses coming that are pretty tough, but he is a fantastic horse. He's been very impressive to me because regardless of the surface or the trip, he's been ultimately consistent, one race after the other. And his race in the 4-star Dave at Saratoga, that kind of stamped him as a real good horse. I mean, the turf course was just a bog. It had poured down rain. A lot of horses didn't handle it. He just went out there and ran like he runs on a firm turf course. He just did his thing. And you got to admire a horse like that.
Bala Rocks, one of the contenders that will take on World Approval, and everybody else in that Breeders' Cup Mile is on the track now. And, Jeff, what are you seeing here from Bala Rocks? What strikes you with him?
Well, what we're seeing is a horse at a very easy jog. Just, again, as we talked about earlier, getting out there on the track, giving the horse an opportunity to look around, blinkers on the horse, rider just kind of posting along as the horse is in a very easy jog going around the track. A little bit of sweat on the horse's neck, probably not anything to really worry about. I mean, it is a little bit warm, a little bit muggy this morning, but the horse seems to be handling himself fine, and no issues really as the horse kind of gets a feel for the track.
Yeah, and he's been knocking on the door against a couple of good ones in his most recent outings. 2 starts ago, he was third behind World Approval in the 4-star Dave at Saratoga, and then last time out, he finished third behind Sway Dwa, who won the Shadwell Turf Mile at Keeneland, and Sway Dwa is going to be back for an opportunity to knock off the boys again in the Breeders' Cup Mile, and very, very good horse.
Yeah, absolutely, and Bala Rocks has also got some blinkers on this morning. He's wearing a figure 8, which is the oldest piece of racing equipment that there is. It helps keep the horse's mouth shut. It closes their mouth so they don't have air going into their mouth when they're running, and it helps them breathe through their nose.
Yeah, and I think I said Sway Dwa trying to knock off the boys. Of course, Sway Dwa, albeit a gelding, is a boy.
So, for all intents and purposes,
is a male. So,
but thank you for that.
Yes, just wanted to clarify. I didn't want to offend Sway Dwa at all in any way. But, boy, that race in the Shadwell Turf Mile was excellent.
Yeah, it was very good. And Danny Tudhope, a fantastic jockey, did a great job with him, getting him up in the final strides. It was quite a performance.
10 foreign-based runners have been entered into this year's Breeders' Cup Mile, including last year's runner-up in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. That's Lancaster Bomber, who is another horse that deserves some consideration in that race. It is probably one of the more contentious Breeders' Cup races, and that's kind of a leap to say because they're all very, very contentious, and all the horses are very good in each and every race. But the Breeders' Cup Mile is a bit of a head-scratcher when you try to handicap it. You might have to go deep in there if you're looking at your multi-race wagers.
Yeah, it's always a tough race because there's countless good horses, the big field, and it can be a little tricky, that race. You need a good trip more than anything, and the turns here at Del Mar are a little tighter than some turf courses, so it's going to depend on who gets the trip as to who's going to win it.
Well, more to that point, trip is everything because of the shortened stretch. So horses not getting that ideal trip are going to have very little recovery to make up any real estate. So they're going to have a clear path to be able to overcome, what might happen early in the race.
Would you say you'd want a horse with a little bit more tactical speed than a stone closer?
I think you do. I mean, look, it's we always see those cavalry drives at the finish here on the turf where horses are coming from out of it. But I think with this caliber of horse, tactical speed's going to be a big advantage from just being able to position your horse in a spot where you can at least make a run when you're coming down the stretch.
Bella Rock's just surveying the landscape here at Del Mar. Seems very comfortable, very calm, very relaxed, and I think that's a very good sign, too, that he's not getting worked up at all.
This is a classy individual. I mean, they've been standing him there for a good couple of minutes after he was done with his light exercise, and he hasn't really moved a muscle, and the rider's sitting chilly here, and Bella Rock's really just sort of like maybe surveying his competition out there on the racetrack, trying to figure out what he's going to need to do, because he's not in any hurry to have to get off that racetrack.
Do I want to go to Brigantine for fish tacos? Do I want to go to Roberto's? It looks like he's just thinking about something else.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, his ears will twitch. Now he's like looking straight at us for a second. He's very cool.
He's
horse.
a pretty cool dude.
Yeah,
I like that.
him.
It's a good sign. I mean, look at horses are galloping past him. It's not bothering him.
He doesn't
He's
turn
not
a hair.
twitching. Yeah, this horse really is handling the situation well, and this would lead me to believe that this isn't something new for Bala Rocks when they bring him out on the racetrack. My guess is they let him go on to and come off the track on his schedule.
It's great when you have a classy veteran like this, right? That can just kind of take it all in. You can send them out there, and for the most part, Jude, as a trainer, you don't have to worry about them getting keyed up. And when they come out here and they're in front of 40,000 people on Saturday afternoon, like Bala Rocks is going to be, that's always a good sign. You like to see that.
Absolutely. I always hashtag old guys rule, and old horses are great. They usually love Del Mar, too. I was talking to somebody about that this morning. When the old horses get here, they get in the sea air. They seem to relax. They really enjoy being here. And this horse is totally old school, Jeff. He's got ace bandages on. You don't see that very often.
I was just looking at that, Jude. It is interesting. You talk about the horses relaxing in the sea air. There's something to be said about the actual horsemen as well. We always talk about shipping down to Del Mar after a long season up in Los Angeles. It's hard work. The work doesn't change, but the mood and sort of the tempo does, and people just relax. And I think the horses sense a little bit of that as well.
Yeah, I think so. I always tell people it's the negative ions in the air that give horses and their trainers and grooms a sense of calm and relaxation.
Now I realize why Bala Rocks was standing as long. He's actually going to train on the turf course, as he's just now stepped onto the turf course. So there's a couple of different gaps on the track.
But his whole demeanor changed, huh? He was really calm. Now he gets out on the course, and he's jiggy-jogging, and he's feeling good.
He knows he's going to be doing something,
yeah.
But I'm not exactly sure whether or not they have this horse scheduled to have a breeze or not.
It looks like it because he has no rings on his bridle, and he's got the blinkers on, so he's probably going to do a little something.
And the rider definitely has his stirrups up fairly high, which would indicate that he's probably going to get out there for a little stretcher legs.
Not
breeze.
as high as you, but
high enough for me, that's for sure.
Well, these days. Back when you were riding, you used to jack those things up pretty good.
Bala Rocks won't be the favorite in this year's Breeders' Cup Mile. And if you're wondering about the percentage of favorites that have won in the 33 previous runnings, well, it's been right about the national average. 11 for 33 is what the favorites are, so 33%. And, it's a race that has always given an opportunity for a good horse to step up and take home the top prize, and it's always been a very fair race, and it's one of my favorite races on the entire program.
Yeah, it's always very competitive, and we've seen some magnificent horses win it over the years.
So what you see there, guys, with this Bala Rocks galloping right now on the straightaway. As he goes past us down the stretch, you see those orange pylons. They call those the dogs. So they put the dogs up on the turf course, keeping that inner part of the turf course in good shape for racing in the afternoon. And the riders are required to keep their horses on the outside of those pylons, or that fictitious line, if you will, that's there. Occasionally you'll have a horse or two that decides they'd like to jump those pylons. But in any event, all of the horses training out there on the grass will be pretty wide.
And that's never preferred.
It's never preferred for
Unless
the
they're a
rider
steeplechase horse.
and the executives that oversee the turf course.
I actually saw Patrick Valenzuela one morning work a horse for Charlie Whittingham, and he just totally ignored the dogs and worked the horse on the inside of the turf. I don't know if Charlie told him to do that or if it was Patrick's idea, but he was like in the steward's office within an hour after that work.
I was working a horse once on the turf for Charlie, and I took out about 5 of those pylons, but it wasn't by design. That much I can assure you. It was a European ship-in that I think had never seen an orange pylon on the
Just
track.
decided to run him over.
And I took out a lot of them.
Mike Penna, Jude Feld, and Jeff Bloom with you here on the first of 4 Breakfast at the Breeders' Cup shows. You can catch us each and every morning, today, tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday, 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern. You can watch us at breederscup.com. You can watch us on our Horse Racing Radio Network website, which is horseracingradio.net, and you can watch us on all the multiple Breeders' Cup social media platforms as well. We're happy to have you with us enjoying breakfast at Del Mar this morning, and no better venue for the sport of thoroughbred racing than right here in Southern California. We mentioned that the pre-entries were taken this past Monday. The entries for the races will actually be taken here this morning. The post position draw for all of the races comes up later this afternoon at 3 o'clock Pacific. So, guys, by about 6 o'clock Pacific, 9 o'clock Eastern, we're going to know where everybody will break from. We're going to know the morning line odds, and we'll start to be able to put the pieces together to this year's Breeders' Cup. Again, Bala Rock's on the turf course now and starting to kind of get into things here this morning, Jeff.
Yeah, it was the weirdest sort of warm-up I've ever seen because it looked like they were almost done with their training. They kind of stopped, went around the track, and then started again. But Bala Rocks is in full workout mode right here. The rider just sitting kind of chilly with the horse, letting the stretch its legs as they go make their way around the turn. Horse changed its leads nicely as it came into the turn, and just now as they make their way into the straightaway and in the middle part of the stretch. Horse is striding out really nicely. Rider kind of not really pushing on the horse, but letting the horse kind of make its way into the wire, making sure that they get enough out of it, and really striding out nicely as they hit the wire.
Yeah, he was throwing those legs right out there. Looked really sharp, and it was an interesting warm-up. He actually acted like he broke off right away after they almost stood still for a second.
Yeah.
How important is it for a horse that's competing in a turf race here in the World Championships to have a little go over this turf course and get familiar with the turf course? Is it significant as opposed to them just galloping on the main track? So
I'm going to answer that question from a personal situation. We, of course, have Snapper Sinclair, who's going to be running in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf, and Steve Asmussen, Hall of Fame trainer, who's won a lot of races, felt that it wasn't necessary for the colt to have his last work on the turf course. More than anything, he really didn't want him to do a whole heck of a lot, so he and Scott Blasey opted to go ahead and give him his final workout on the dirt. The horse has already run over the turf course. He got a chance to work over the turf at Santa Anita, so I use that one example as well. Maybe it's really not that important, and maybe it's really dependent on each individual horse. Snapper's a horse that's much more mature beyond his age and tends to be able to adapt to any situation. If you have a horse that maybe reacts a little bit, you might want to get him out there, especially because this is a turf course that has tighter turns than some of the turf courses that these horses are used to.
Yeah, as in most things in thoroughbred racing, it depends on the horse. Now, some trainers love to work on the turf. Other trainers don't like to work. Laz Barrera told me he never worked a horse on the turf because he felt the turf in the morning was not the same as the turf in the afternoon. It has dew in it. It's kind of slick, and he thought that horses didn't appreciate that sometimes, and you didn't get a true reading on how your horse was doing. That was his theory. He's a Hall of Fame trainer. He wasn't really noted to be a grass trainer, but he won some races on the turf. So everybody's got their own ideas. Bobby Frankel used to like to work horses on the turf. Charlie Whittingham, almost, every one of his turf horses worked on the grass. It just depends. I've worked horses here on the Del Mar turf course. I think it's fine for some horses, and I had one filly that won a couple of stakes here, and she always worked on the turf, no matter what. So it just depends on the horse, and I think the trainer's style.
Yeah, and I think more so the individual. Really, certain trainers do probably have a preference, but I think it does come down to the individual. And in events like this, the Breeders' Cup, I think more than anything else, it's how is this horse going to handle the surface and or react to the situation, the configuration of the track, or what do I want this horse to do leading up to that race? And you have to sort of weigh those out, the pros and cons. And I don't know that there's an exact right or wrong answer, but it really probably comes down to the individual.
It could be situational too, like a horse that comes from Europe that's used to running on the straight or something. You may want to work them around the turns a little bit just so they get a feel for it, gallop and work.
Sure.
So it can depend.
Well, we are just 4 days, 3 hours, and 49 minutes away from the 34th Breeders' Cup World Championships. We are off and running with the first of 4 Breakfast at the Breeders' Cup programs. We're going to step away for a quick break. We'll leave you with this look of Bala Rocks, and we'll come back in just a few minutes. You're watching Breakfast at the Breeders' Cup live from Del Mar. Welcome back to Breakfast at the Breeders' Cup. Mike Penna, Jude Feld, and Jeff Bloom from the Horse Racing Radio Network with you this morning, live from Del Mar, as the Breeders' Cup comes to this seaside destination for the very first time in its 34-year history. We are getting a live look at many of the contenders on the racetrack throughout the morning. The break just concluded, meaning that so many of the other contenders that were not out earlier are now coming onto the track, including Calculator, who is entered into the Twin Spires Breeders' Cup Sprint, a beautiful gray. He's one of several contenders on the racetrack right now.
Yeah, he's a speedy horse, and he's been around a while, done most of his racing here in Southern California, but he's got some gas to him, and he looks all muscled up.
And he's an easy horse to spot out there on the racetrack. He's about as wide as they get.
You can't miss him. I remember when he burst onto the scene with a couple of big efforts, and people were thinking maybe he's a Kentucky Derby type horse, and he's certainly become a very, very nice horse. Didn't fulfill those Kentucky Derby dreams, but he's become a very nice horse, and he's one of the horses you have to keep an eye on in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. We touched on this earlier, and for people that are just joining us here on the program, many of the horses have already had their final workout. So a lot of what you're going to see here today for the majority of the horses is going to be easy gallops. There will be a few horses that work. We saw Bala Rocks earlier this morning work on the turf course. But for the most part, you're just going to see a lot of... Yeah, Gunrunner did a little bit of work here this morning on the main track in his preparation for the Breeders' Cup Classic. But most of the heavy lifting is done at this point.
Yeah, we've talked about that all morning long, that the reality is these horses are coming in, they're prepared, they're ready. Most of the trainers are really going to just want these horses to show that they're coming into the race healthy. They've gotten a chance to get acclimated to the surroundings. You'll have some trainers that will go ahead and go old school and maybe give them a little blowout a day or two before the race. I know trainer Bill Spar, who has our Sky Diamonds getting ready to run in the filly and mare sprint. He's talking about giving her a little quarter mile, 3/8 mile pop on Wednesday. For the most part, you're right. We're going to see just what we'd call regular gallops for most of these horses, but we'll have the odd mini workout here and there.
What a great story Sky Diamonds is, too, Jeff. I'm glad you brought her name up because she is a horse that you ended up claiming. You've taken her from a claimer, moved her all the way up through the ranks, and then here she is in the Breeders' Cup. A pretty special story.
Yeah, you say me. I've been along for the ride. And
yeah, you didn't really have much to do with it.
I'm enjoying the spoils. It's been a dream come true. I mean, you can't make stories like that up. To have here at Del Mar last year, claimed her for $40,000, and now to be one of the favorites in a Breeders' Cup race is unheard of, and every one of us involved fully understands, appreciates, and gets the significance of that. And here goes Calculator, really starting to motor along. The rider really trying to hold this horse back a little bit as they go through the turn.
It's flying.
The horse is flying, and this is a fast horse. This horse goes out there and works. This is no strange thing, but at the same time, the rider really trying to keep this horse reined in here as he cruises on past another horse that's on the inside, breezing along, but not quite as fast.
Ooh, he had to split horses. He had to pass one pony. It's been very eventful work for a horse that's really fast, and he just ignores them all and just goes right on by.
He's keen to go. The horse on the inside is also breezing, but certainly not anywhere near as fast, and this was definitely a good tightener for Calculator to get in and really striding out here on his right long lead and really coming to the wire in good fashion.
Last time out, Calculator was second here at Del Mar in the Grade 2 Pat O'Brien. That was back on August 26th. He's raced 4 times here at Del Mar. He has 2 seconds and a third, so still looking for that elusive first win. He's going to have to be fast on Saturday in the Breeders' Cup Sprint if he's going to get past defending champion Dre Fong and everybody else. Of course, stranger things have happened for sure, no doubt about it. Looking at Hoagie, who is on the track here now, Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint contender, and JT just getting into things.
Yeah, it's a little bit different kind of work than what we saw from Calculator. This one's much easier, much more controlled. Of course, Hoagie runs on the grass, but he's a very good story, too. He's been running super races lately.
And this is something we talked about earlier. This horse is breezing along on the main track, yet will be running on the turf course. So kind of going back to what we were talking about before, whether or not a trainer has a preference for having a final prep take place out there on the grass or not.
Well, Mike Maker trains a lot of horses to run on the turf, but he works a lot of them on the dirt.
Yeah, we talked about that earlier. How important is it to have a workout on this turf course, or at least to go over the turf course to get familiar with it if you're going to be running in a turf race here at Del Mar? Some trainers, it's a difference in philosophy. Some trainers say it's not important. Others say, yeah, I want to make sure that my horse is familiar with that turf course. And, of course, all the questions going to be answered coming up Friday and Saturday. 13 championship races held over the 2 days, 4 on Friday, 9 on Saturday. Of course, we will have coverage for you of every single race on the network, Horse Racing Radio Network. You can tune in on Sirius XM Satellite Radio and worldwide on our website, horseracingradio.net. Coverage begins at 5 o'clock Eastern Time on Friday, and then we come back at noon Pacific, 3 o'clock Eastern on Saturday with every championship race. Of course, you can also watch on television on NBC Sports as well.
Yeah, but if you're not available to a television set, there's only one place to be.
We have you covered.
We got you covered.
We do have you covered.
And it's great because, people that are working on farms and people that are driving home from work and want to see the races, but they can't, it's a great opportunity for them.
Guys, back to that Breeders' Cup Sprint for just a minute. We saw Calculator a few moments ago going through his work. He'll try to tackle Dre Fong and everyone else. But Dre Fong for Bob Baffert, another major player this year. Some people saying maybe he's the most likely winner of any of the short favorites that we're going to have in the Breeders' Cup. If he can pull off a victory here on Saturday, he's going to join Midnight Loot as the only two-time winners of the Breeders' Cup Sprint. Midnight Loot, by the way, also trained by Bob Baffert.
Yeah, Midnight Loot. I'll never forget the day he won the Breeders' Cup Sprint at Monmouth, and I was down there getting soaking wet in the paddock, and Bob Baffert came back, and everybody wanted to interview him, and he said, no, I'm going to Jude first because he was the guy that stuck with me when I was losing.
Yeah.
Talking about Dre Fong, here's a horse that really only has one blemish on his record, if you can call it a blemish, and that was when he was supposed to be running in the Bing Crosby, and as soon as they came out of the gate, the horse made this weird move where he ducked in, lost his rider, Mike Smith, and the rest was history in terms of Dre Fong not getting a run in the Bing Crosby. But he had trained so well after that mishap before going over to Saratoga here at Del Mar. The horse trains like an absolute monster over this track, Dre Fong. Just a spectacular way of going, and watching this horse train leading up to coming here to Del Mar at Santa Anita, I think not only on paper, but just in terms of the physicality of Dre Fong and the way that Bob Baffert has handled this horse coming into the Breeders' Cup, he does look like one of the absolute standouts.
We talked earlier about what it is that makes Hall of Famer Bob Baffert so good. Well, nobody has been better than Bob Baffert over the years in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. He has saddled a record 5 sprint winners. As a matter of fact, Bob's very first Breeders' Cup win came in the sprint with 30 slews back in 1992. Who knew that Bob Baffert would be sitting here with 14 Breeders' Cup winners all these years later?
Not even Bob Baffert.
Not even Bob Baffert. He did not expect that.
He did not.
Now he's Bob Baffert. Back then, he was just another trainer sending out 30 slews, right? He was that quarter horse guy that came over and saddled 30 slews to win the sprint, and the rest is history for Bob Baffert.
Yeah, who is this guy that wears jeans and a tie?
Mind Your Biscuits is on the track now, at least coming onto the track here at Del Mar. You remember Mind Your Biscuits was third behind Dre Fong in last year's Breeders' Cup Sprint. He has won 2 of 4 starts here in 2017, including the Dubai Golden Shaheen on March 25th, and last time out 8 lengths behind Dre Fong in the forego. He'll have to do better here on Saturday.
Yeah, and what he's doing right now is most of the horses that are stabled here at Del Mar are stabled in the main backstretch area, which is directly across from us, where we're located here at the top of the stretch on the front side. So what those horses will do when they come onto the track, for the most part, is they'll come onto the gap right around where the 3/4 pole is, where they start the 6 furlong races, and jog towards us, what we would call the wrong way on the track, and that's what he's doing right now. So they'll probably warm him up for, say, half mile, 5/8 of a mile or so before they go ahead and turn him around. But really nothing major to note other than he's warming up fine and just sort of getting a feel for the surface in terms of getting a handle on things and preparing to go through his regular training.
Yeah, and here's Imperial Hint, another contender for that lost Twin Spires Breeders' Cup Sprint. And, guys, Imperial Hint, the Florida bred, he's going to be if he can pull it off, just the 6th Florida bred ever to win the sprint. And I say just the 6th. That's a pretty good batting average in just 33 runnings of the race, now 34 on Saturday.
Yeah, not too shabby. Imperial Hint, kind of a diminutive horse, not what you see from Calculator or a horse like that with a real big, powerful look, but speedy enough, and we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and he enters with 5 consecutive victories, so he's been in very good form. As a matter of fact, Imperial Hint has not been beaten since November 23rd of last year. So the horse is really on a roll. And you know what? All of his victories that he's had in this win streak have come by open lengths.
Yeah, he's a little tough too, huh?
I like the way this horse is handling himself on the. He's definitely full of himself. I mean, he's given his rider a real heck of a time. You know, they're supposed to be just jogging right now, and every once in a while the horse kind of gets away from the rider and breaks into a little bit of a gallop. But he's got a wonderful composure on the track. He's really moving out nicely and strutting a very loose and extended jog, and looks the part on the track right now.
Yeah, another one that seems somewhat unflappable here at Del Mar. We talked about that earlier with Bala Rocks, how he came out and he was a total professional. Gunrunner did the same thing. Imperial Hint feeling pretty good here this morning, and his neck bowed and really looking pretty good.
Yeah, he looks sharp, but I think he's out for a gallop. He's got his rings on, give the rider a little bit more leverage, which he obviously needs because this horse is not the easiest horse to be on, huh, Jeff?
He's out for a jog, which is turning into a gallop. going.
Yeah, the outriders are going to slow him down one of these minutes here.
Yeah, when you're going the wrong way on the track, which is coming towards us as we sit at the top of the stretch, the rule is no faster than a walk or a jog, but they may give a little bit of flexibility here to some of these Breeders' Cup horses out on the track.
Well, it's a lot more calm here with the fewer horses than it is during the regular meet. Talk about that, Jeff, because traffic can be quite crazy here sometimes.
Yeah, well, so Del Mar, notorious for having all kinds of activity out there on the track, in particular after we would have the breaks, where all the trainers want to have first run at a good surface. For this meet, the fall meet, not all of the trainers ship their full barns down to run during the meet. They may ship a handful or a portion, and so you do have less activity out there on the track. And I think also some of the trainers that do intend to ship more horses for the upcoming fall meet are maybe waiting till they get through the initial couple of days of Breeders' Cup horses.
Yeah, I was wondering if that was like a rule, like the Breeders' Cup said, we only want horses that are participating in the Breeders' Cup cards to come down early, or what the deal was as a horseman. Maybe you know something
as
about
far
that?
as I know, I don't think there was any rule in place, and I think it was just understood that they have an expectation of what trainers typically do ship down for the fall meet, and I think they felt that number would be fine as long as we had the proper breaks in place for these Breeders' Cup horses to come out and train. It does seem as though each day, as we get closer to the Breeders' Cup, I see another big van coming in with more horses unloading. So I think by the time we get to this weekend, we'll have probably, the capacity, the number of horses we would expect to have for the fall meet stabled here. But we have close to, 2,000 horses stabled on the grounds during the main summer meet. That's a lot of horses to bring out over this track. There is a training track here. A lot of people aren't aware. There is a training track over by the Solana Gate. It's over in the main backstretch area. I don't believe they're opening the training track during the fall meet. So all of the horses training here will either be out on the turf course or the main track.
Jude, didn't you tell me that's where the late Alan Paulson used to land his helicopter?
Yeah,
right in the middle of the training track?
I used to love that because I rented a house across the street from where Mr. Paulson lived, and he would fly the helicopter down and he would circle the beach, and his wife would get up and get in the car and drive over to the training track and pick him up, and he'd be sitting on the sand in his trunks like 5 minutes after the helicopter whirred around. It was the greatest thing ever. I said, wow, that's nice to be a rich guy.
Life is good.
Maybe that's why they're not using the training track for this. Here we get another look at Imperial Hint. They did turn this horse around for a gallop, and the rider on Imperial Hint has got his work cut out for him. I mean, he has got his feet in the dashboard, got an extremely tight hold on this horse who really wants to run off with him. I mean,
it almost looks like he's breezing.
It does. It's a controlled gallop, and they have as much gear on this horse as you could possibly have to help the rider out outside of having draw reins. He's going down the stretch right now.
That's fantastic.
This horse is really looking good on the track, though. I mean, he's keen. He's wanting to do more, but he's also sort of handling himself well, considering how strong he is.
Yeah, a lot of pent-up power there with Imperial Hint this morning.
You can see he's won 5 races in a row looking like that. That's pretty impressive.
We talked about favorites doing so well in the Breeders' Cup Mile, winning at an average of 33%, which is about the national average. Well, they're not quite as good in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. As a matter of fact, just 24% favorites getting to the winner's circle in there, 8 for 33 in the history of the Breeders' Cup. So this is a race that's been a little bit more wide open. And again, Dre Fong going to be the favorite in there. He's trying to defend his title from last year, and you have to think that he looks pretty salty on paper anyway. But beware, history of the Breeders' Cup showing that favorites have struggled a bit in that race over the years. Mind Your Biscuits getting into his work right now, trained by Chad Summers. This is the very first starter for trainer Chad Summers in the Breeders' Cup. Mind Your Biscuits coming through the stretch right behind us right now, guys.
Yeah, he looked like he was flying when he came by us, and he's striding right out towards the wire now.
Yeah, and he's flying in sort of a different fashion, kind of like the rider's not really got a stranglehold on the horse, but Mind Your Biscuits is moving along just fine. I mean, I'm sure they're getting the work out of this horse that they wanted to get. And one of the nice things, we're talking about how many horses are stabled here. Well, each of these horses, for the most part, has the track to themselves. If they time it right, the riders on each of these horses, they can pretty much come down the stretch by themselves.
Yeah, obviously calculated. And
that one didn't work
right.
out so well, but maybe they wanted that.
Maybe they wanted a few things to pinball off of.
I'm sure his trainer, if he didn't want it, is saying, there's 2 horses on the racetrack or 3 horses on the racetrack. How did I end up in company?
The great California trainer Bruce Headley, he was the master of breaking in on people's works. You'd be working the horse and you go, who is that? All of a sudden you know, oh, it's Bruce.
He's
blowing one out.
Yeah. Mind Your Biscuits really does look good following the workout. I mean, he's the rider's not having a tough time sort of pull the horse up, but at the same time you could tell if the rider encouraged Mind Your Biscuits to go around there again, he'd have no problem doing it. He's just easing out of the work, kind of in a nice walk here, and they'll probably post him, let him look at the track and the horses going by, and he's on back to the barn.
This is the great thing about horse racing. We've just seen 3 sprinters of different body types, styles, and they all worked differently, but they all worked good.
Yeah,
right?
Each in their own right have different sort of styles, as you say, but really hard to knock any one of them. And they each look the way they were supposed to look, the way you'd want them to look in terms of how they handle themselves on the track.
The 2 juvenile turf races will be contested on Friday here at the Breeders' Cup. The Juvenile Fillies Turf will be the first one to run, and then later on in the afternoon we'll see the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf, and both of those 1 mile on this Del Mar Oval. Jude Golden Dragon is on the track now. He is one of the contenders for that Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf, and his second preference obviously coming in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile if he does not get into that race. But Golden Dragon, getting a look at him right now on the racetrack.
Yeah, he looks good. He's kind of acting a little silly right now. I think he's just trying to get used to the environment. He's a little bit of a leggy sort, and now the rider's got a little bit better control of him. But the juvenile turf is always an interesting race because you have horses coming from different racetracks, running different distances in their careers. So it's always a good handicapping puzzle.
Yeah, and Golden Dragon is a horse that is really kind of on the outside looking in here. He is way down on the list of contenders for the juvenile turf. He is ranked like number 27 or something like that right now. So he's going to need a lot of help to get in, more than likely not going to get into that race. And then we'll see if he can draw in somehow into the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, but we could be seeing a horse that's on the outside looking in this year's Breeders' Cup.
Yeah, and it's kind of a shame for him because he's won his last 2 starts, but they weren't stakes races. He's never competed in a stakes race. He's a son of Skip Shot, who's a $7,500 stud out of a Marquetry mare, and his last 2 races have been excellent from off the pace, but he's only run on the grass, so running on the dirt would be a bit of a reach for him, although it looks like his pedigree leans toward dirt.
Yeah, Jeff, what are we saying? What are we seeing here now, Jeff, with Golden Dragon?
Well, we're seeing a breeze. This is a horse that glad I could help.
Do you like what you're seeing, Jeff?
I'm glad I could help you, Mike. Well, let me finish my thought, Michael.
You're only going to get with us.
All right, he's at the quarter pole.
Anyways, Golden Dragon is going through a breeze here, and they opted to let this horse breeze on the main track. Again, another horse that is entered into the juvenile turf preference, but look, the horse is handling himself fine. I'm sure this horse has had numerous workouts over the dirt track, including the ones we see on his bio line. The horse is moving along fine. He seems to be handling the surface good. Kind of does have a makeup of a horse you would like to see, or that looks like a turf horse. His action a little bit higher, sort of typical of a horse that maybe gets over the turf a little bit better. There's no question that this horse, from a distance standpoint, can handle the mile. This is a horse on the also eligible for probably good reason from a number standpoint. Horse looks like he's improving. Hasn't really done anything wrong as of late, but comparing this horse to the other horses that have entered the juvenile turf, some of those other horses have done quite a bit more in their short careers. But this horse does look like he's on the improve and certainly handled himself fine over the dirt. Maybe would be a little bit better over the turf.
Yeah, his resume doesn't quite stack up with some of the others in there.
Do you think it's interesting, Jeff, that the Breeders' Cup Juvenile was kind of undersubscribed on the dirt and the turf had way oversubscribed? Is that unusual for racing in the United States?
I think it's typical for the Breeders' Cup. I mean, that's what we've seen with the creation of the juvenile turf races, is that you do have this influx of European interest, and the fact that it seems as though each year there's one or two very dominant, very strong 2-year-olds that look difficult to beat, and some of those lesser 2-year-olds, and when I say lesser, horses that maybe haven't accomplished as much, maybe are looking for an opportunity to run in a Breeders' Cup race, opting for what might be an easier spot on the turf. I wasn't surprised at all. Did I expect to see 27 horses pre-enter for the turf? No, that's a lot of horses.
Yep.
I think this year, because we have such an incredible collection of dirt juveniles, that maybe some people shied away and figured, you know what, that race is going to be just too tough for us.
Yeah, that's true.
Best Performance, trained by Christophe Clement, coming onto the track now. Best Performance, one of the contenders for the Juvenile Fillies turf. She's a daughter of Broken Vow. 1 win from 5 lifetime starts, but she has been second in 4 of those races. So she is always right there. Comes out of the Grade 3 Miss Grillo Stakes at Belmont, where she was second, beaten a length, so she'll have to do just a bit better coming up on Friday. Again, that should be the race that kicks off the Breeders' Cup for us here on Friday afternoon, and looking forward to the Juvenile Fillies turf. But boy, is she a really, really pretty filly, Jude.
Yeah, she's very leggy. She's very feminine. She has a beautiful face, and she's tough. I mean, she's a nice filly. She's certainly a contender in there, although she seems to have a little bit of second-itis, but that could change, rather quickly. So I think she's one you have to certainly consider.
But you're right, Mike. I mean, she's such an elegant filly.
Very
and
elegant.
She's so composed on the racetrack. They've got the bell boots on her. What those are little rubberized covers that go. You lift them over a horse's hoof, so when they're jogging, you wouldn't wear those when you're galloping, but when they're jogging, that way they don't accidentally clip themselves and cut the back of their foot. And so typically when a horse is jogging, you'll see them put those bell boots on. And I really love her presence on the racetrack, just a very leggy, elegant composure out there.
And Christophe Clement, just magnificent trainer. He wins with every type of horse, and he's noted, of course, for his turf horses, but he can train 2-year-olds. He can train dirt horses. He's just outstanding.
Yeah, this filly began her career on the dirt. She began with 3 straight dirt sprints and then switched to the turf at Kentucky Downs earlier this year on September 6th, where she was second in a 7-furlong race. The Juvenile Fillies then came back, and I mentioned the second-place finish in the Grade 3 Miss Grillo Stakes last out, too. So it doesn't matter the surface, the distance. She has shown up. She's very versatile, and she continues to improve, and maybe one that you can keep an eye on going forward. She is owned in partnership with West Point Thoroughbreds and some other partners there. So best of luck to all the connections of Best Performance in the Juvenile Fillies turf.
Yeah, and it's interesting, when you watch her on the track, when she gets in the areas where we've got the fencing up and there's less opening, she's very focused and sort of concentrating on her jog. When she goes by the gaps, for instance, when she went by the 3/4 gap, that's the turn area where you have a lot of activity. You have a lot of trainers that hang out there in that corner watching the horses. You have the gap opening where it's an opportunity for horses to maybe kind of get a look at where they can get off the racetrack. And she was kind of looking around when she went through that area, but now she's refocused as she comes down the straightaway, the backstretch actually coming towards us.
Guy, here's an interesting horse in the Breeders' Cup Turf. That's Sadler's Joy. Now, Sadler's Joy was fourth last time out behind a couple of contenders that he'll face again on Saturday afternoon. And he'll have to turn the tables on Beach Patrol, who won the Grade 1 Turf Classic that day at Belmont. But a horse that really likes these longer distances. He loves the mile-and-a-half distance. He's raced 5 times at the mile-and-a-half. He has 3 wins and a second. So you can expect that Sadler's Joy can be in the mix somewhere, at least coming down to that final furlong on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, he's a very talented horse. His race at Saratoga was excellent, and it was a big win for trainer Tom Albertrani, who does a really good job. And he loves this horse. His stable loves the horse. He's a stalwart there, and that race in the Sword Dancer was excellent. He won at 7-1. He came back. He didn't have the best of trips against Beach Patrol in the Turf Classic, but he still managed to finish a respectable 4th after starting out 11th. That's the problem with him sometimes, is he gets a little far back in his races and has to overcome a lot of traffic. As we all know, turf racing is about trips, and sometimes the trips kill him.
Yeah, 9 foreign-based runners, by the way, entered into the Breeders' Cup Turf. We mentioned that when pre-entries were taken, 46 entrants from overseas were entered. That is a record for the Breeders' Cup World Championships, and 9 of those showing up here in the Longines Breeders' Cup Turf.
Yeah, and no surprise. It's what you expect to see. And, when we talk about trip in particular on the turf course here at Del Mar, one of the fortunate things for the runners in this race, regardless of post position, is the mile-and-a-half distance starts all the way at the back of the backstretch. So in other words, they have as much run as they can possibly have to make their way into that first turn and get into what they might consider a good position. But again, the end result is you still have a shortened stretch, comparatively speaking, to some of the other turf courses that many of these horses run in these what we'd call distance or marathon-type races. But these are all pros. They know the mile-and-a-half distance, and certainly the horse we were just talking about is no stranger to running a mile-and-a-half.
9 previous Breeders' Cup winners pre-entered this past Monday. Again, entries being taken right now as we speak. The post positions will be assigned, and the morning line odds will be assigned later this afternoon, beginning at 3 o'clock Pacific, 6 o'clock Eastern Time. 2 previous Breeders' Cup winners are in that Breeders' Cup Turf, with defending champion Highland Reel and Oscar Performance. Now, guys, when you look at Highland Reel, a horse that is really, really consistent. He has won 2 of 6 races since taking last year's Breeders' Cup Turf. Both of those have been Group 1s. But he's racing this year. It's a little bit of a different scenario for him. He's racing this year on just 2 weeks rest, because last time out he was 3rd in the Champion Stakes at Ascot, which was on October 21st, so he's going to have to come back quickly. Last year he was 2nd in the Arc, which was his start before the Breeders' Cup Turf. That was a full month before the race. Any concerns there with Highland Reel coming back so quickly?
Not for me, but it might be for some people. I think European horses have a tendency to run more frequently and closer together than our American horses do, for various reasons. But Highland Reel is a world-class horse, and he's got a world-class trainer, so I don't think that's a concern, really.
Yeah, I'd follow that comment up with what I was just going to say, and that's, well, it's Aidan O'Brien.
Right.
So, am I going to question
6 Breeders' Cup Turfs, by the way?
Who are we to question whether that Highland Reel is coming back too quick? I mean, certainly, worthy of a question, but the reality is you're talking about one of the world's best trainers, and this is one of those races where you go into it saying, all right, is this where I do the checkbox for this is one of the European winners? Because I know there's going to be some European winners. Which race is it in, or which races is it in? But certainly you'd have to make a strong case for Highland Reel, and regardless of when his last race was.
He didn't get his turf course last time either, his favorite ground. And a lot of times horses, they'll run horses on ground they don't like, but tell the jockey, don't worry about it. He doesn't like this ground.
Yeah.
So it's a different kind of setup than what we do here in the United States, and Aidan O'Brien certainly knows how to play the game.
If High Chaparral were to win, he will join if not High Chaparral were to win, High Chaparral's already won the Breeders' Cup Turf. He's done it twice. If Highland Reel were to win the Breeders' Cup Turf, he would join Highland Reel and Conduit as the only horses to win the turf on 2 different occasions. Both of those horses did it in consecutive years as well.
We got Pieri Bianchi on the track right now, and the rider sporting a New York Yankees vest. Sorry about your luck, pal.
Hey, you came close.
You sure it's not a New York Rangers?
I don't know. No, it looks like the Yankees to me. But
you think Jim Cassidy had anything to do with that?
It's quite possible. It's quite possible.
And by the way, this name translates from Italian to white feet.
White feet. And there's certainly 4 white bandages, and looks like there's some white feet underneath there, so probably aptly named.
Was that translation done like impromptu, or was that like research work there, Mike?
That was a little bit of homework.
How about
there,
that?
Yeah,
look at that.
I may be Italian, but I don't really speak Italian. I'm a fake Italian.
Kurt Becker taught him something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kurt Becker.
Are we under Musco lighting, by the way?
All right. Great stuff here on the Breakfast at Breeders' Cup program. This is the first of 4 Breakfast at Breeders' Cup shows we will bring your way in partnership with Horse Racing Radio Network. I'm Mike Penna. Jude Feld and Jeff Bloom are alongside me, and we'll be with you each of the next 4 mornings, beginning at 7 o'clock Pacific, 10 o'clock Eastern Time. Untamed Domain is on the racetrack now, one of the contenders for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf.
Yeah, and he's a leggy sort as well. He's doing a little gallop. Just super easy and relaxed. Nice to see. No blinkers on or anything. Just a really nice juvenile colt cruising around there.
Yeah, you're right about the leg. Kind of a lighter, sort of tall, lanky, stretchy type of horse, which, again, another horse you might say set up for the turf almost, and just kind of going through a leisurely gallop here, stretching his legs, got some company behind him. Let's see if he picks up the tempo a little bit with this horse sort of breathing down his neck. Not too bad. The horse is controlled. Rider's got a pretty steady hand on him, and just going through a regular gallop.
A couple of occasions, Jeff, you mentioned kind of suited for the turf, just by their action that you're seeing. When you're at the sales and you're selecting horses for your Bloom Racing stable, are you that focused on selecting a horse that might be suited better to the dirt or the turf and looking for different characteristics that the horse might have? And if so, what are they? Well,
more so looking for good race horses. We want fast horses that win big races, and so that's first and foremost. Whether it's a dirt horse or a turf horse, there are certain characteristics you might look in a horse, how they're put together, what their physical makeup is. Certainly pedigree factors in. At the end of the day, you never really know for sure. Some horses look the part of being, say, a turf horse or a traditional, conventional kind of look to a horse. And at the end of the day, they prefer the dirt more. So we're really looking for good physicals, horses that have what I'd call all of the check boxes, those components of what goes into making a good horse. And then whether or not they end up being a good dirt horse or turf horse, that's sort of secondary.
When you're looking, pedigree plays a big part in it, too. You can't buy a horse off a catalog page. You have to look at the horse individually. But to know that there's some turf breeding there, that usually helps make a decision. And that horse, Untamed Domain from the Gray Emotion barn, a guy who knows his way around the grass course a little bit, too.
The Filly and Mare Sprint comes up on Saturday afternoon. Bar of Gold is the horse you're getting a look at now. She is one of the contenders in that race. That's another race that features a defending champion and a returning Breeders' Cup horse in Finest City. But Bar of Gold is a horse that is going to have to improve on a 6th-place finish in the Grade 1 Spinster at Keeneland last time out. But keep in mind, guys, that race was contested at a 1 1/8, and it was on a sloppy main track. Now she goes to a completely different ball game because she cuts back to 7 furlongs for the Filly and Mare Sprint, and she'll likely catch that fast track here on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, she's more of a sprint to a one-turn mile type. A 1 1/8 definitely out of her range, I would think. But she's a really nice filly, very hard knocking, kind of a blue-collar filly. She doesn't get a lot of the credit that she deserves, but she's talented and game and tries hard every time she runs. So I wouldn't be surprised to see her do some good, if she gets a good trip. But she's just out for a little jog here with her big white shadow roll on. She looks happy as a clam.
Yeah, she is a millionaire, too, is Bar of Gold. And
hence the name.
Yeah, 6 starts. Yeah, exactly. 6 starts at the distance, 1 win, 2 seconds, and 2/3. So she can handle this particular distance, but can she handle the competition here on Saturday? That remains to be seen. She's going to have to elevate her game just a little bit, but she is a good-looking, classy filly, and she is pretty happy out there right now, Jeff.
Yeah,
she is. I mean, she's a lovely filly. I mean, I just love the way she handles herself on the track. I mean, she's a well-bred filly by Medaglia d'Oro. She's, she's one like. She's kind of a below the radar horse. She shows up for every dance, and every once in a while everything goes her way and she gets the victory. She's run 24, 25 races, I believe. She's earned $1 million the hard way. You figure 7 furlongs, that's probably a better distance in the filly and mare sprint than, say, 6 furlongs, so why not take a chance? This filly is no stranger to running over different surfaces, but she certainly looks the part on the racetrack. I mean, they just went out there for a nice, easy jog. She's a classy filly walking off the track with her handler just now putting the lead shank on her to walk her back to the barn, but she doesn't need a handler. She's calm on her own.
yeah, she's one you'd love to own, huh?
Yeah, she's a nice filly.
No doubt. She steps off the track. We're going to step away for a short break. We'll leave you with a live look at training from Del Mar. This is Breakfast at the Breeders' Cup, live from Del Mar, right here on BreedersCup.com and HorseRacingRadio.net.
I've always liked that filly. She's tough.
He said he was going to come by, and then he walked by and said something to me. We were on the air. I thought he said he was coming back. I don't know. Will there be more horses coming out? It's only 8:30.
There will be, but it's going to be slim pickings. Yeah, there will be. And you'll see some more on the turf.
There'll be some on the turf
For this next, I would venture to guess we'll see 1 or 2 breezers on the turf.
I'm glad that we're not on camera actually the whole time because we're, some of these horses we haven't even.
Yeah, you have to look down and
You're like, we're scrambling to figure out who the horse is.
And for sure, the only time we're on camera is when we see ourselves on camera.
Correct. Yeah. Welcome back to Breakfast at the Breeders' Cup. Mike Penna, Jude Feld, and Jeff Bloom from the Horse Racing Radio Network taking you through the first of 4 Breakfast at Breeders' Cup programs we'll bring your way. You can join us tomorrow morning, Wednesday morning, and Thursday morning, 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern, and we'll take an inside look at all the horses that are on the track getting ready for the Breeders' Cup World Championships, which begins on Friday. 13 championship races contested over the 2 days of the 34th Breeders' Cup World Championships, and we'll have that exclusive radio coverage for you here on HRN beginning Friday afternoon. You can head over to our website, horseracingradio.net, to check out a complete Breeders' Cup Week schedule, listing of affiliates and SiriusXM channel information, and listen worldwide at horseracingradio.net. Guys, we'll also encourage people to follow us on Twitter at HRRN on Twitter. They can follow Breeders' Cup at Breeders' Cup. And, of course, they can watch us right now on our website and at breederscup.com and on Breeders' Cup social media platforms. Giving you a look at Catholic Boy, who is on the track right now. He is a contender for the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. He is a perfect 2 for 2 to begin his career, a son of More Than Ready, and Jude exits that big win in the Grade 3 with anticipation on August 30th at Saratoga.
Yeah, well, More Than Ready is one of my favorite sires. My brothers and I campaigned the first More Than Ready Stakes winner, Ready to Live, and he's been a fantastic sire over the years, stands at Windstar Farm. But this horse is super talented. He looked great winning his stakes race at Saratoga. Looks fantastic on the track this morning, and I expect him to run quite well over the weekend.
Yeah, Catholic Boy is a horse that's looked good on the track every day since he's been here. In fact, probably one of the more talked about younger horses leading up to either the Juvenile Turf or the Juvenile in terms of just his composure and physicality on the racetrack. Looks like they've got the bell boots on him today, so he's probably just out there for a nice leisurely jog. A very, very well put together horse, good size. He's alongside his pony, although the rider does have his stirrups way up high on him, so just kind of curious that they would maybe not be breezing unless.
I don't know.
Oh no,
she's got a stick, and
yeah.
But
yeah, it looks like getting ready to do a little something more with them, right?
Got the rings on the martingale. I know people sometimes do work that way, but
yeah, I know they're getting off the racetrack there. So
yeah, there we go.
But definitely alongside the pony. The horse isn't really acting up, but a colt that knows his way around the racetrack, but also feeling very good. And I think they got just what they wanted out of today's training.
Yeah, and guys, this is a gray, overcast morning. Temperatures in the mid-60s here in Del Mar, and most of the horses that we've seen on the track are feeling good. It's not hot, it's not humid like it was here last week, so that's a benefit to so many of the horses that are coming here. And I would think the Europeans, who are used to a bit of a cooler climate, are going to relish this particular climate when they get here.
The conditions are perfect. You've got that marine layer early in the morning. Like you said, there's a little dampness to it, but it's not overly cold. You're not seeing horses wash out and horses shipping in from different locations across the country, including from overseas, are going to appreciate the conditions here. And really leading up to the Breeders' Cup throughout the week, we're supposed to have moderate fall conditions. It's supposed to stay dry for the most part and stay rather sort of mild, if you will, for this time of year, up high 60s, which is great racing weather. And these morning conditions are actually, they're absolutely ideal for horses to train in.
Yeah, many European racetracks are close to the water, and I think a lot of the Euros have really relished Del Mar over the years. They've come in. A lot of people always try to buy the turf horses from Europe to come over here and contest the Del Mar Derby and the Del Mar Oaks, which are very popular and highly sought after races. So I think the Euros have traditionally done well here. I did well with European horses myself here at Del Mar when I was training, and I think they really like the conditions.
Getting a look at Bullard's Alley, who is a contender for the Longines Breeders' Cup Turf on Saturday. That's the race that will precede the Breeders' Cup Classic. This is one of my favorite stories in the Breeders' Cup, guys, because when you look back on what Bullard's Alley did in his previous race is pretty remarkable. He pulled off an absolute shocker at odds of 42-1 in winning the Grade 1 Canadian International on October 15th at Woodbine. He didn't just win that race at 42-1. He won it by a record 10 3/4 lengths. So he demolished the field. He ran like he was 4-5, not 42-1, and here he is in the Breeders' Cup.
Yeah, he's a horse that's going to have different conditions here at Del Mar. Most likely he's going to be running over what we'd consider to be a very firm turf course compared to what he ran in or ran over at Woodbine in that last start. But, certainly an impressive performance nonetheless, regardless of the conditions of the track. And also, for a moment, I thought Bullard's Alley was one of those Breeders' Cup horse statues that they position over throughout the town in Del Mar. He was standing on the track. He could not have been any more still and any more composed while he and Ryder stood there watching the horses go by before turning around to break into their gallop.
I love the red and white checkered blinkers, too. Pretty cool. The red shadow roll.
And red and white. Look at the bandages.
Yeah,
they've got red and white
bandages.
flip-flopped on each.
He's all decked out. He was looking like the Écorché earlier, Jeff. That was a good analogy there.
I wonder if those are somewhat Indiana Hoosier type colors, right? Aren't they kind of a red color, Indiana Hoosiers?
Yes.
Yeah, they are, right? They're red because
or
Tim
Oklahoma
Gleishaw,
Sooners or
Tim Gleishaw, the trainer of Bullard's Alley, is an Indiana native. He's a former teacher and basketball coach at Indiana, not coaching at Indiana, but in Indiana, and so maybe that's why we're seeing so much red and white with Bullard's Alley.
Well, he's hard to miss out there on the racetrack. I mean, they've got a lot going on with all the equipment. You've got the bright red rings with the bib, the covers on the leather casing there.
Yeah, the Martin. Yeah,
you got the shadow roll.
The shadow roll.
And those blinkers.
He's the tax store's best customer.
Yeah.
Tim Gleishaw also going to be represented by Bucaro in the turf sprint. These are his first Breeders' Cup starters, so Tim Gleishaw, a very special day. And how special would it be? His birthday is actually November 3rd on Friday, so if he could pull off a big win on Saturday, that would be one heck of a birthday present to give yourself.
There we go. Look at Lady Eli, the horse of the Breeders' Cup.
Racing royalty right there.
And rightly so. What this filly has overcome in her career and what she's done on the racetrack is nothing short of remarkable, and that's one special filly right there. Of course, Lady Eli will be running in the Breeders' Cup filly and mare turf.
Gets a rematch with last year's winner, Queen's Trust, who she was narrowly beaten by. But Lady Eli, phenomenal story. She's one of 3 horses entered into the filly and mare turf for trainer Chad Brown, and Lady Eli making her 3rd appearance in the Breeders' Cup in what figures to be her final career start. She won the Juvenile Fillies Turf in 2014. She missed the 2015 filly and mare turf with an illness that nearly cost her her life. Came back last year, and I mentioned that narrow defeat, beaten just a nose by Queen's Trust in the filly and mare turf. Should be a tremendous rematch with those two.
Yeah, and her trainer Chad Brown was quoted this week by Dave Grenning of Daily Racing Form of saying her most recent work, he couldn't remember a work that was any better than that one in her entire lifetime. So that's a testament to how well she's training. She looks fantastic. Super talented, just such a cool story, a cool filly.
She has such a presence, a command of herself on the racetrack. She just exudes class. It's just a spectacular vision to see Lady Eli out on the racetrack, and obviously a huge fan favorite for what she's overcome and what she has done on the racetrack. It's really a great story, and to have her back here running in the Breeders' Cup again is really a treat for all of us.
Yeah, it's such a high level, but she has a Zenyatta-like quality to her. I mean, fans are drawn to her. You mentioned her presence, which is unsurpassed. I mean, she just acts like she knows she's something special, and she just goes out there and does her work. Such a consistent, hard-knocking filly. There's nothing you can say bad about her.
You can't get more consistent than Lady Eli. She's raced 13 times. She has 10 wins and 3 seconds from those 13 lifetime outings. She's a perfect 3 for 3 at the 1.1 miles distance, which is the distance that we're going to see the filly and mare turf run this year because of the configuration here at Del Mar. As a matter of fact, it's the 3rd different distance in as many years for the filly and mare turf, but Lady Eli figures to be very, very tough to get past in this one, and what a storybook ending it would be if she could pull off the victory here on Saturday.
It certainly would, and watching her train, I mean, she's just jogging, and the ground that she covers with a leisurely jog rivals horses out there on the track going through a gallop. I mean, she just covers so much ground. When she lifts up her feet, it's with no effort whatsoever. She's efficient, she's fluid, And again, that presence, it's just such a regal way about her. She comes into this race the right way. And as you said, it would be a storybook ending. And these are the kinds of things that we all look forward to at the end of the year for the World Championships.
Did she go favorite in the Filly Meriturf?
I gotta think so.
Yeah.
I mean, unless
how could she not?
Yeah, I mean, she's just so popular with the fans, and she's so beautiful.
And she's in good form. She enters on
Right.
a 3-race win streak, although she has not started since winning the Boston Spa at Saratoga on August 26th. So it will be her first start in 10 weeks. And that's something that's interesting about this year's Breeders' Cup. We've seen a lot of the connections choose to skip that final traditional prep race, which would come about a month before the Breeders' Cup, and instead come into this race off of an 8-week, a 9-week, or a 10-week layoff. A little bit different approach for many of the trainers this year, including Chad Brown with Lady Eli.
Yeah, it's more of a Chad Brown style thing to have him have a lot of time between races than other trainers, but it seems to be the popular thing to do. It wouldn't be popular with me, but everybody's got their own ideas.
Here's another Chad Brown trainee, Paula Silverlining. Of course, she'll be running in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint. And this is a filly who one little hiccup in her most recent start, but she's really done nothing wrong for the most part since joining the Chad Brown barn, and one of his many legitimate contenders in the Breeders' Cup races. And she's just out for a jog. Another one just sort of stretching her legs. Chad Brown just arriving. His full contingent is there in full force on the backstretch, and he's just allowing his crew to get a chance to, get a feel for the sights. Paula Silverline in a couple spots, kind of looking around, acting up a little bit. Not really acting up, but just sort of feeling good and not really familiar with her surroundings.
Yeah, she's a terrific filly, and she's another one. A private purchase by Juddmonte Farms. She's going to the court of Arrogate next year, as far as I know. So that'll be interesting if Arrogate wins and she wins.
What a Breeders' Cup it could be for Juddmonte too.
They go off and have a baby. What's that baby going to be worth?
Yeah, and Paula's Silver Lining, of course, a daughter of a Breeders' Cup champion and Ghost Sapper. So a lot of Breeders' Cup tie-ins here with this mare. 5-year-old mare. She's won 11 of 22 lifetime starts. She's already earned more than $1.5 million. And, Jeff, you mentioned that one hiccup in the Grade 1 Ballerina. Before that, she was awesome. She had won 4 in a row coming into the Ballerina. And I think if you draw a line through that one, Paula's Silver Lining looks very, very interesting in that spot coming up on Saturday.
And it's kind of interesting if you think about it. Her former trainer, Michelle Nevin, before Paula Silver Lining was purchased privately, beat Paula Silver Lining with her Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint runner By the Moon, who, of course, comes into this race as a strong contender. So a lot of intrigue and storylines, as always the case when you get to the Breeders' Cup.
We threw out a poll question on our radio show a couple of weeks ago. We asked our listeners how they like to play the Breeders' Cup races, and do they like to play multi-race wagers like pick 3s and pick 4s and pick 6s and those types of bets, or do you prefer more of a singular race approach in betting exactas, trifectas, superfectas, maybe even just win, place, and show on a particular horse? And overwhelmingly, most people said that they prefer to go the route of the pick 3s and pick 4s and pick 6s. And when you're putting those tickets together over these couple of days with so many wide open fields, I guess you have to try to find a spot or two, Jude, that you can single just to save yourself a little bit of money, don't you?
Yeah, it's great if you can have a horse that you can really embrace and then build around that particular horse. But these races, like I always tell people, in the Breeders' Cup, there's going to be some multiple Grade 1 winner that finishes last. So,
yeah,
which is very disconcerting when you think about it. But that's going to happen. I mean, these fields are so deep and the horses are so good, but not everybody can win. There's only one winner in every race unless we have a dead heat, which I believe has only happened once in the history of the Breeders' Cup. But it's very tough, and it's tough to narrow them down. Sometimes you might have a race, 14 horses, and you think 10 of them can actually win. It's tough. So the tickets are huge when you when you go to bet them, and you got to bring a lot of money to play those races and have a realistic chance of winning.
We talk about that each week, though, don't we, as we lead up to the Breeders' Cup, the enormous value, because as you mentioned, multiple Grade 1 winners are going to finish well back in some of these races. So there's incredible value, and if you can make a case for a single or two here and there, and you have to have some conviction at the end of the day, otherwise you can't have them all. You hope you're right, and if you are, you're going to get rewarded for it.
Well, our former and occasional colleague, Sean Clancy, always says, you got to bet what you know. And I think that's a good thing to keep in mind when you're at the Breeders' Cup, because there's so much buzz and information, and oh, this guy likes this horse, and oh, this lady told me her horse can't lose today. You hear these things, and you know, they kind of play on your mind. But I think if you stick to what you know to be your whatever, how you usually handicap your set of numbers, your sheets, your whatever, if you stick to that and make that your core, then if you have the luxury of throwing a few extra bucks, if you want to put the lady's horse in that says she can't lose, if you want to, you know, go with a trainer tip or something and throw those in, but don't start with those and then try to figure it out. You know, bet what you know first. And it's always good to have a little straight action, you know, win and place or whatever on a particular horse, and use that as your core, because the money can go really fast.
Just had a look at the gray 2-year-old filly, significant form, walking off the main course here. She is a daughter of Creative Cause. We'll see her in the Juvenile fillies turf. She's finished first in both of her starts, but she only has one win to her credit, because that first start at Saratoga, she interfered with another rival, clipped heels, and then ended up being disqualified and placed 7th that day. So even though her past performances show that she finished first in both of her career races, she actually only has the one win to her credit, but that win was in the Grade 3 Miss Grillo Stakes, where she defeated best performance in some of the other contenders in this race on Saturday afternoon, or actually Friday afternoon, in the Juvenile fillies turf.
Yeah, she's a good filly. She's by Creative Cause, who's by Giants Causeway, out of a Harlan's Holiday mare and bred by Governor Jones in Kentucky. Both of her races were excellent. A lot of people thought her disqualification was a little dubious, but you know, everybody does.
Depends on what side of that disqualification.
Yeah, well, they moved her all the way down to 7th, so there had to be something there.
Yeah, well, you would say, I always say, if you're going to foul somebody, foul them so that they don't finish in the top 5, so there's no reason to take them down. But in this case, they did take her down, so you might be right, Mike. But her last race was excellent as well, and I got to give the ownership and trainer Chad Brown credit for just saying, well, look, she broke her maiden, we're going right to the stake. That was our plan. That's what we're going to do. And it worked out for them. So I think she's a major contender. She got a terrific turf figure in that race, and you have to respect her.
He's Jude Feld. I'm Mike Penna. The gentleman to Jude's right is Jeff Bloom, former jockey, now racehorse owner through Bloom Racing Stable, looking at having 2 horses in this year's Breeders' Cup, which is pretty cool. And because of that, he gets to wear his purple Breeders' Cup cap with the name Snapper Sinclair right there, one of his 2 Breeders' Cup contenders. And Jeff, going to be a magical Breeders' Cup for you, my friend.
Well, it already is. I keep pinching myself with the realization that, hey, we're here at the Breeders' Cup talking about it, but I've actually got a couple of runners, so it's an exciting week for sure.
I got to give you credit too. The horses that you're running against, you've been talking them up.
Well, what are you
trying to cash a bet?
It is what you see, and,
That's right.
and what you see is what it is. So,
bet what you know, right?
Yeah, but no, I will say this. We come in not only with 2 Breeders' Cup runners, but with 2 horses that I think have very legitimate chances. Of course, I'm close to it. I'm biased, but at the same time, I think my 2-year-old Snapper Sinclair has not only shown he's got the ability, but he's improving, and he's trained lights out since shipping out here to California, including his most recent workout here yesterday at Del Mar. And the filly Sky Diamonds, who we gave some time off after her Rancho Bernardo win, looks better than I've ever seen her. She's training lights out. She's in against a monster in Unique Bella, but look, she's shown that she can beat a good horse. So it's exciting, and we're definitely looking forward to both days.
Well, since pre-entries were taken last Monday, there have been some defections to this year's Breeders' Cup races, and we'll just run through those very quickly. If you haven't heard of these horses that will not be competing for one reason or another, here you go. The Dirt Mile has lost Imperative, will not go to the post in the Dirt Mile here at this year's Breeders' Cup. It 'Tis Well was taken out of consideration for the Breeders' Cup Distaff. The Juvenile fillies lost Lady Ivanka. The Breeders' Cup Mile Balabali was out. And then the Breeders' Cup Classic Diversify and Keen Ice both coming out of that race at this point. And, again, the main entries now being taken and the post positions and morning line odds assigned later this afternoon.
Yeah, you're going to that party, and you'll be the first to know what's going on.
Yeah, we'll keep you up to date.
You know, defections are always part of the deal. You hate to see it, but it's just the nature of the game. How about Jerry Hollendorfer with it as well, having a filly in the distaff after Songbird being retired? And then you look at Unique Bella, who I went to Jerry's barn for about 2 weeks every day trying to convince him that Unique Bella definitely wanted to be a distaff runner in this year's Breeders' Cup. You know, and apparently I wasn't as persuasive as I thought I was going to be. But it is kind of interesting because Unique Bella, had she had another start, maybe they would have given her the opportunity to run in the distaff, but with only the one start, they opted for the sprint.
And her performance and her comeback was very good. Were you there for the race?
Yeah, so I mean, an impressive performance, and you know, look, she's a heck of a filly. And what's her best distance? We definitely know she can win sprinting. She's shown she can handle the 2 turns, but she's just a special filly, and it's a very tough race. She's not the only one in there, but it's just kind of interesting that the way it turned out, Jerry ended up with no runner in the distaff.
Are you going to keep an eye on her training? Have you watched her since she came out of that race and how she's doing?
I know what she can do, so I'm going to ignore her training for now.
You'll let Jerry handle that.
Yeah. And I'm done trying to convince him to go in the other spot.
Yeah, that's not happening.
Jeff, I love it. The exercise rider aboard Talismanic coming onto the track now. He's got the cell phone out. I don't know if he's texting or snapping pictures to remember this moment.
Mike, you just got that guy in trouble because it's now a $100 fine, and you just announced it, so he's not going to be happy with you when the outrider comes over and hands him that
so he's got time to put the phone away, right?
He's not on the track yet, but I wonder if anybody told him.
This is one of the European contenders for this year's Breeders' Cup Turf. Again, 9 foreign-based runners entered into the race. Talismanic, a Group 2 winner. Took a Group 2 in France 2 starts ago. Last time out was 3rd, so looking to do better here. Always seems to be around at the finish, guys. 15 lifetime starts, 5 wins in 5 seconds. So an interesting horse and another son of outstanding sire Medaglia d'Oro.
Yeah, he's got a beautiful white face and a very interesting looking horse. He seemed totally relaxed going to the track by just by judging with the rider using his cell phone. He wasn't too worried he was going to rear up and knock him off. So a pretty cool horse.
One of the Godolphin runners, too, by the way.
And as typical for some of those horses that ship over, they'll bring out a lead pony, not necessarily to take a hold of the horse, but just to give them something to point at, some familiarity and some a companion.
Yeah, a little something to follow.
Just somebody to hang out with him. But that face, right? It's almost like it's Halloween and the horse has a mask on. I mean, that's a pure white face.
Looks like the Phantom of the Opera almost.
Here's Madeleine Irish bred, trained by Roger Varian. We'll see her in action Friday in the first Breeders' Cup race, the Juvenile Fillies Turf. 2 wins from 6 starts for Madeleine, and last time out 3rd in a Group 1 at Newmarket.
Yeah, she always gives a good account of herself. She's a hard-trying filly. Roger Varian, world-class trainer, very smart guy, and has her looking great this morning. She's in fine fettle, as they say, and just cruising around there with the pony, just out for a little hack.
When we came on the air at 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern, we brought you to the first Breakfast at Breeders' Cup program with a live look of Breeders' Cup Classic contender Gunrunner going through his workout here this morning. Gunrunner handled everything like a total pro, looked absolutely tremendous earlier this morning. Jude, since that time, we've gotten a look at many of the major players, but even before Gunrunner came out, there were horses working really as soon as the racetrack opened very, very early this morning. You were here. You got to look at some of them.
Yeah, they were out. The horses were out early, about 5:30-ish. Stellar Wind came out for a a little jog. She looked good. She looked very happy. Didn't turn a hair the whole time she was out here. Paradise Woods was in the paddock when I got here. I got to speak with Richard Mandel and his wife Randy for a little bit, and Richard's very pleased with the way she's trained up to this race. She looked really good and looked super galloping down the stretch. She really was striding out nicely. Roy H., a horse that's in the sprint, he went for a little gallop, and he looked good too. He looked delighted to be here. He's run well over this track, and maybe should have won the race that Dreyfong bolted in. He had a rough trip there dealing with Dreyfong running loose. So he's a horse that we have to look at in the sprint.
The Breeders' Cup coming up in 4 days, 2 hours, 19 minutes. That's your countdown to the Breeders' Cup World Championships, and we're happy to have you with us this morning and each of the next 3 mornings as well as we bring you these Breakfast at the Breeders' Cup programs. Don't forget you can join us on Horse Racing Radio Network Friday and Saturday afternoons for exclusive radio coverage of every single Breeders' Cup race. So if you can't make it to a television to watch on NBC, make sure you tune us in. You can get more information on our website, horseracingradio.net. And yes, you can listen worldwide on our site. It's all there for you at horseracingradio.net. Madeleine going through her paces here. We talked about her just moments ago. Again, for most of the horses, most of the heavy lifting has been done. The workouts are pretty much complete. We'll see a few more probably throughout the morning here, but most of it's been just kind of jogging and getting familiar with the surface and the surroundings, especially for the Europeans.
Yeah, the Europeans are seeing the track for the first time, a lot of them, so they're just out there having fun. I really like the demeanor of this filly Madeleine. She just looks like she's having a good time, and she's got some gray polo bandages on and jogging nicely. And the pony girl's talking to the exercise girl. Looks like we're just having a fun time out in the woods or something. But we're here at Del Mar and getting ready for an important race. But Madeleine doesn't care about any of that. She's just enjoying herself.
Her look is a little more discreet than Bullard's Alley a little bit ago with the flashing red and white lights.
Yeah, she's pretty plain Jane attired this morning. She doesn't have her fancy hat and her party dress on, but
she's a cool filly.
She is. I really like her. I like how she acts.
Yeah.
She's just very tractable. She just seems to be having a good time.
Yeah, what do you want me to do? I'll do it.
Yeah.
Where are we going? That's fine with me.
How come we're going so slow?
Jude, you mentioned Paradise Woods, who was out earlier. You mentioned talking to Hall of Famer Richard Mandela, who is no stranger to Breeders' Cup success. That race, the Breeders' Cup Distaff, is going to be simply sensational. You remember last year we had that incredible stretch battle between Beholder and Songbird. They hit the wire together. We know that Beholder, in her final career start, got the victory narrowly that afternoon at Santa Anita. Both of those fillies' mares are now retired, and the 3rd and 4th place finishers from a year ago will meet again in this year's Distaff. That, of course, being Forever Unbridled, who was so good throughout the year, and Stellar Win from the barn of John Sadler. But Paradise Woods is trained by Richard Mandela. Of course, Richard trained Beholder, who won the race twice in recent years. And then Elate, who is one of the 3-year-old fillies going against the older mares in this year's Distaff, is trained by Hall of Famer Bill Mott, who has won the race on 5 different occasions. No trainer has won more Breeders' Cup Distaffs than Bill Mott. Now, between Bill Mott and Richard Mandela, they've saddled the winner of the Distaff in 5 of the previous 7 runnings.
You're not going to ask me who to give the most reliable prize to.
No, I am not. I'm pointing out a fact here that if you're handicapping the Distaff, maybe it's Mott, Mandela. Maybe you have to look at their horses, and all due respect to Forever Unbridled and Stellar Win, maybe it's one of those other 2.
Well, I love Richard Mandela. He's been a tremendous influence on my life, and we've been friends a long time. But Bill Mott is a great trainer, and he's been very good to me over the years in many Breeders' Cup races. But he's got a filly, Elate, that has really stepped into a new dimension. And I think if there is going to be an upset to the local filly here, Stellar Wind, it's going to be with Elate, because Elate is just really been amazing in her last 2 starts. She continues to train like a freak, and I think she's going to be pretty tough.
And she beat the older fillies and mares last time, too, so that's a feather in her cap.
She's a big, imposing kind of filly, too, isn't she?
Yeah,
Just a big powerhouse of a filly, almost like a stud colt.
Right, right. Yeah, a lot of people, like her, and they bring up the 3-year-old thing, but her speed figures have been fantastic, and she's just an amazing competitor now. And Mott's done such a good job with her because she kind of went a little mental there for a couple of races. When she broke her maiden first time out, they were already getting the plaque ready for the Écorché. People were saying, "Oh, this is a great filly," blah blah blah. And then she went a little mental and wasn't paying attention, wasn't doing the things she should have been doing. She even pulled up in one race at Keeneland, just almost refused to run. And Mott's been tremendously patient with her and has brought her along to all new heights. I mean, she paired 108 Brisnet speed figures in her last 2 starts, and if she moves forward off of that, they're all going to be in trouble.
Here's Home of the Brave on the track right now for trainer Hugo Palmer. Last year, we saw Home of the Brave in the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. Didn't do much running that day. Finished 11th of 14 and hoping for better in this year's Breeders' Cup Mile.
Yeah, you got to give him a credit for braveness, right?
Yeah.
For coming back and trying it again. That's tough to do sometimes.
Yeah, we're seeing kind of a trend here this morning, too, right, for a number of the Europeans coming out somewhat later in the morning. So it's quite quiet out there on the racetrack, not a lot of activity. And what we've seen here in the last hour or so is a number of the Europeans just coming out for a leisurely stroll around the track, just something to stretch their legs. They're probably coming out of quarantine, here. And so just an opportunity to get out there, get a feel for the ground.
Yeah, and the Europeans, when they do arrive here, that's a good point, Jeff. They do have to spend nearly a full 2 days in quarantine. Right. Not quite 48 hours, but it's close. I think it's right around
42, I think it is.
42 hours. Yeah, and then they're able to come out onto the track and stretch their legs and do their work and get ready. So many of the Europeans, I think probably most of the Europeans are here now, and we'll get a chance to see more of them as we move throughout this program the next few mornings, too, which will be a lot of fun.
I believe the majority of them had already arrived, and sometime this morning, I believe, is the last grouping of Europeans to arrive, if I'm not wrong about that.
All right, as we get a look at Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf contender Massar, the Irish bred, we're going to step away for a quick break. We will leave you with a live look at training from Del Mar. You're watching Breakfast at the Breeders' Cup, live from Del Mar. Welcome back to Breakfast at the Breeders' Cup. Mike Penna, Jude Feld, and Jeff Bloom, live from historic Del Mar in Del Mar, California. The Breeders' Cup World Championships making their very first stop here at Del Mar in the 34-year history. And it promises to be a good one coming up Friday and Saturday. And happy to have you with us. We're back with you tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. Pacific. Make sure you join us for Breakfast at the Breeders' Cup as we bring you an inside look at all the contenders who make their way to the racetrack. And, of course, we'll have interviews over the next few mornings as well with owners, trainers, jockeys, and should be an awful lot of fun, gentlemen, over the next few mornings. It's been a lot of fun here today, too.
Yeah, it's been fantastic this morning. It's a beautiful day here in Del Mar, and we've seen a lot of nice horses out and really enjoying it.
Yeah, it's a cool morning, overcast, temperatures in the mid-60s or so. And there's a little bit of a breeze, too, that at times makes it feel even a little bit cooler. So it's perfect weather for the Europeans who come here from cooler climates and expecting to maybe run into hotter conditions here in Southern California. Not happening. It's been really pleasant here over the past few days.
It's actually perfect weather for all of the horses that are here at the Breeders' Cup. So it's for the horses that are used to warmer weather, it's not so cold that it's going to bother them. And for the horses that are used to much cooler temperatures, it's plenty cool enough. So really, I mean, that's one of the selling points, too, for the Breeders' Cup this time of year. You're approaching middle fall, and you can have some pretty severe weather conditions when you're not in an area like San Diego.
As somebody who grew up 1 hour from Saratoga in upstate New York, of course, this a vastly different type of racetrack and venue than Saratoga offers. I've always heard that when the tide comes in, because we're so close to the ocean, when the tide comes in, that the surface changes here at Del Mar throughout the day. True or false?
I would say somewhat true.
Yeah?
There are times when it'll speed up at a different time of day. It's not as prevalent now as it used to be. They've changed this track and worked on it many, many times over the years. But in the old days, if you made speed figures, which I used to do when I was a kid and had lots of time on my hands, the tide would seem to rise up and make it a little firmer, and so you'd have a different track variant for a different part of the day. Like the first races might all be a little slow, and then all of a sudden they went to normal or a little fast. So I think there's something to that, but I don't think it's as prevalent now as it used to be.
Yeah, I think there's some truth to that. I mean, it's one of those things that there's the mystique about it, and for those of us who have been coming here for so many years, you notice that there is something tied into that. How do you fix it, or how do you put you're right, Jude, there's been a lot of work on the tracks, but it's kind of like if you go play golf at Torrey Pines and you're on the putting green, and everybody will tell you that has played it time and time again, that your putt is going to go towards the coast. Even if it's uphill and turning to the left, it's going to go down and to the right. It just has something to do with the draw of the tide, the ocean, and it pulls something over that way. But
if anybody can predict which way my putts are going to go, they're better than I am.
It's kind of like you at the craps table, Mike, and throwing the dice, and they go in the opposite direction.
Hitting the stick man. Yeah, that's never good either. Yeah. This is live TV right now, JT. What are you going with here?
I'm going with Brian Lynch.
Oh, Brian Lynch was walking by. There we go.
He's going to come over and take my chair, and he's going to talk to you guys for a minute because he's got some real horses in the Breeders' Cup.
You just corralled him too. He was walking by, and
you thought you were able to sneak by, and sure enough,
yeah, we
Brian Lynch joining the team here.
Aussie.
There you go.
What's up, Brian?
Everything's good, boys.
How are you, my friend? Good to see you. Happy Breeders' Cup.
Thank you.
Happy Breeders' Cup. You ready to roll?
Let's go.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
What do you think of Del Mar? Have you been here before?
Oh, I was stabled here for a long time.
Oh, you were?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So I had about 15 years out here before I shifted back east.
And, Brian, you were telling me the other day you're planning on making this kind of a new thing for you, or sort of an old new thing.
Yeah, no, going to just feel our way this fall meet here and see how it all goes, but we brought out a few extra horses to stay on after the Breeders' Cup.
Oh, really? So you stick around for a little bit?
Yeah.
Good. What is it about Del Mar that makes it so special?
Oh, it's just a unique venue. I think just the location of it, and it's a bit of a gloomy old day today. But routinely, we've got some fantastic, consistent weather and great energy, and just a great spot to enjoy racing.
All your horses settled in well?
Good, Jeff. Yeah, really happy with him. Got to work into Oscar over on the turf yesterday. Very happy with the way he worked, and got a nice work into Heart to Heart before he left Keeneland, and I'll just train him into the race.
So we were talking earlier, Brian, about horses that run on the turf, yet they train on the dirt. Some trainers decide to have that final prep on the turf course, some on the dirt. Is it a individual horse situation, or how do you make that call?
Yeah, normally I'd train most of the grass horses on the dirt, but I just want to let Oscar have a feel of the turf course here, so we let him slide a half mile there yesterday. Heart to Heart, he's not a real good workhorse on the dirt, so he 9 times out of 10 we work him on the grass.
Okay. What was it about Oscar performance this year that I know you were pointing for this race? You said, okay, we're going to take a look. Let's see how he runs. Was it about him? What did you see in his past couple of starts that said, yeah, we're coming to Del Mar?
Yeah, I think that, he's 2 races in the Belmont Derby and the Secretariat were very good. I think he showed us there that he can go on, and I think ultimately the 1.5 miles he's better suited to that than he would be to shorten up and running the mile here. I think he'll really enjoy this course. I'm going to put him on the lead and see if they can catch him, and so that's going to be exciting. And I think he'll enjoy the 1.5 miles.
What about the track configuration here? We talk about the setting at Del Mar, but we do have a short stretch, much shorter than most of these horses are familiar with. We have a little bit tighter turns. Is that a concern? And do you do anything different in terms of how you train a horse leading up to a track like this?
Well, fortunately enough, my 2 horses I run are, forwardly placed horses, and particularly Heart to Heart. I think he'll love that horse runs a turn so well. I think he'll really enjoy the turf course here, and he'll enjoy the short stretch, Jeff, because they've been catching him in them long stretches. So hopefully he puts his signature move on, opens up at the quarter pole, and he hangs on. But I think the 1.5 miles, Oscar, very tactical, can lay up close. He doesn't have to worry about a pace scenario. I mean, he doesn't have to worry about having to weave his way through a big field, so hopefully all that will go in his favour too.
Brian, when you've brought horses to the Breeders' Cup, they've come ready to run. You've always shown up with live horses, and Oscar Performance being a perfect example, winning the Juvenile Turf last year. Take us back to that day at Santa Anita. What do you remember about that afternoon?
Even that day there, we felt very good going into it. Again, Santa Anita, tighter sort of turf courses as opposed to the courses he's been coming up on the East Coast, and just felt like he needed to be very forwardly placed, and he broke sharp, got himself a good position going into the first turn. I can't remember the name of Larry Ravelli's horse that was in there, but he set a pretty solid pace, and we sat off him, but there's no better feeling when they straightened up for the run down the lane, and he was a few clear, and then he opened up more, and then you could see they weren't going to catch him. So it was if you can ever pull off one of these races, it's just an unbelievable feeling.
What are you thinking there when he comes? He's winning by open lengths. Are you thinking just stay on the horse?
Yeah,
don't fall off.
Yeah, don't fall
off.
off.
Is that the first thing that comes to mind?
Yeah. Just get to the wire. Get to the wire.
Heart to Heart. Always so game, always around at the finish. Talk to me about Heart to Heart a little bit.
Yeah, he's a courageous little guy. He's grade ones. He's evaded him, but hey, maybe it might all come together in a big event. So he's really doing well coming into it. Again, it's not going to be an easy race, but he acts like he's really on his game. So I'm sure he'll give us one of his 110% efforts.
Advantage, disadvantage for horses shipping into the West Coast from the East Coast and horses coming from overseas. Do you think it's an advantage coming to the West Coast as opposed to the East Coast, or does that really matter?
Yeah, I don't know. Good question, Jeff. I mean, my guys bounced off the van. The day we were here to unload them, and the day they flew in, and they, all the horses were happy. We had big, deep beds for them. They got down, rolled, and they really settled in quickly. And probably it's this time of year coming out into this cooler, getting them out of the cold weather on the East Coast, coming out into here is nice temperature change. I think they're all doing real well.
Brian, is there something different walking into the paddock with your horses for an event like the Breeders' Cup than like your average everyday race? And if it is, What's different for you when you do that?
I mean, I try to keep it all on an even keel, so there's not a roller coaster of emotions. But it's very hard not to get excited on these sort of days when you walk in, and it's the Super Bowl of horse racing, and the crowds are there, and the who's who of racing's there, and the elite equine athletes are all pitting their abilities up against each other.
How'd you celebrate after Oscar Performance won last year?
I think we had a couple of cocktails.
A few more in the offing this year, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll follow that up with, and on other days, how do you wind down?
I got 30 days the last time I wound down. No, I mean, it's like I say, it's a roller coaster of emotions, this sport. So, you take the good with the bad and hope there's more good than bad.
Brian Lynch, ladies and gentlemen. Brian, appreciate the time. You're always very generous with your time. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
good
fellas.
luck.
Best
go
of
get
luck,
it done.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, go get it done. Oscar Performance, Heart to Heart, both trained by Brian Lynch, and one of the true good guys in the sport of thoroughbred racing.
You're putting him. Brian's one of the best guys
Yeah.
in the game of horse racing. I mean, he's just a wonderful person to be around. He does a phenomenal job, with his horses, and he's been in this game a long time. He's no stranger to winning big races, and if he brings his horses over for the Breeders' Cup, don't ignore him.
I didn't want to say it when he was sitting next to me. I thought it might be a little creepy, and it's probably even creepy when I say it now, but I love the Australian accent.
Yeah, better off that you left that to just us and let him walk away before saying that.
He's a great guy. And
Super guy.
I've known him many, many years. He's worked for Bobby Frankel, and at one time of his life, he used to date a girl that galloped horses for me, and I got to know him really well then, and he's just a fantastic human being.
Yeah,
Love
I hadn't
hanging
realized he
around
spent so much time here. I didn't know he was here all that long.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And like I said, it was, when I ran into him the other morning, he's like, oh, yeah, I'm here to stay for a while. It's like he's coming back, so that's good news.
Well, here's a horse he may have to tackle in the Breeders' Cup Mile, Mr. Rory, who is coming on to the racetrack right now here at Del Mar and going on to the turf course now. And we've seen a few horses come out on the turf and do their work, kind of make those final preparations as we get ready for the 34th Breeders' Cup World Championships. But Mr. Rory on the turf course now.
Yeah, he looks good. He's happy. It looks like he's going to breeze Ryder's Got a Whip with him. That's a usual.
Oh, he's definitely gonna breeze.
Good indication.
And the reality is, most of these horses should look good. I mean, it's the week of Breeders' Cup, and these are horses that are special horses, and the odd occasion you'll see a horse maybe isn't moving out the way you'd like to see.
Yeah, I agree with you, Jeff. But I think sometimes we've seen a few orangutans out there that horses
sure.
that aren't handling it. But
Absolutely.
it seems like the Euros are handling it well. It was nice to hear Brian say, his horses, came off the van and settled right in, and that's what you want. I mean, you want these horses all to be at their best. I mean, that's what this whole 2-day event is about, is showcasing our best horses, and you want them to be at their best and enjoy themselves while we
Sure.
get to enjoy them, and I think that's very important. So it's great to see these horses being relaxed, and a lot of people were asking me, about coming to Del Mar and how's it going to be. It was like Del Mar was a mysterious place. It's not mysterious to us because we grew up here. But it's one of those places where horses really do thrive here.
Mr. Rory, a contender for the Breeders' Cup Mile, but guys, he's definitely on the outside looking in there. He's going to need plenty of help to get into that race because he needs about 6 horses in front of him to come out in order for him to run in that race. But he's cross-entered into the Breeders' Cup Turf, which would be his second preference if he were to get in there. But even in that instance, he's going to need 4 horses, now 5 horses to come out in order for him to sneak into that race. So more than likely, Mr. Rory not going to be competing in one of these Breeders' Cup races, but he is holding out hope, and if nothing else, he's getting a pretty spirited work here this morning.
Yeah, trainer George Papapadromo is training and leading this horse over here as if he's going to make it into one of these races, but he'll have options for sliding into an undercard type of race or another stake race that'll fit this horse's running style. They're just kind of, I'd call this a breeze, really. I mean, they're really not asking for Mr. Rory much here down the lane. Ryder doesn't have the stick out on him, just on his own, doing what he's supposed to do, kind of stretching his legs and moving along nicely. And getting in a work just in case they were to draw into either of those.
Yeah, the nice part about this horse is he's locally based, right? So he doesn't, if he's on the outside looking in those two races, it's great if he could draw in, but if he can't, okay, fine. Like you said, Jeff, we'll find another spot for him, and it's not like he has to ship in from out of the country or from out of state. He's already here, so he gets to run pretty much out of his own stall.
That's exactly right, and it's interesting. I mean, a pretty versatile horse. If you think about his last win going down the hill at 6.5 furlongs, and back in June of 2016, last year, he won going 1 mile and an eighth. So what's this horse's preferred distance? I don't know, somewhere in between, maybe right at the mile. Yeah. Or any race he can draw into.
And George is a trainer that doesn't mind taking some shots.
Sure.
He's won some big races doing it. So
no question.
We'll see how it goes for Mr. Rory and George Papapadrome.
Yeah, and a nice little breeze here this morning on the Del Mar turf course, and the Del Mar Bermuda grass, I can say that, Bermuda grass turf course here, and it's in pristine condition, as you might expect, for the Breeders' Cup World Championships. And keep in mind that Del Mar's fall meet is set to begin on Wednesday, and the Breeders' Cup will be the highlight of the meet in the early stages, and then we'll see more great stakes racing action as we move throughout the next month or so here in Southern California.
Yeah, it's kind of nice because, of course, the Breeders' Cup festival taking place on Friday and Saturday, but we're going to get to see some races run here for a couple of days, and I think not only is that great for the fans coming into town for the Breeders' Cup, but for the local supporting fans for Del Mar, but also for the connections of some of these horses to see how the track's playing.
The main track is a 1-mile oval here at Del Mar. It is comprised of 10 inches of El Segundo sand, and you mentioned the short stretch. 919 feet is the stretch run when they turn into the stretch and get to the wire. The turf course even a bit smaller, 7/8 of a mile. I mentioned the Bermuda grass, which is positioned over 9 inches of sand. The stretch there, 817 feet, so you have a little bit less time to make up ground, so you better be moving when you hit the top of the stretch.
Yeah, there's not a lot of recovery there. It's all about trip when you're talking about a stretch run that's as tight as this is. So momentum is everything. You know, you don't want to lose the momentum when you're coming around that turn because you're not going to have a lot of time to recover from that.
Do you try to have your horse in a contending position by the time you hit the top of the stretch?
You know, it's a tricky situation because you want to save ground, but at the same time, you don't have a lot of time to get out. It's definitely a jockey's turf course. You know, we talk about a rider's race. We're going to have world-class jockeys riding here in the Breeders' Cup, but there's certainly an advantage, I think, a home field advantage to jockeys like Kent DeSormo, Corey Nakatani, Joe Talamo, those guys who ride the turf so well, and in particular have done so well over the years on this Del Mar turf course.
Yeah, let's not forget Gary Stevens.
Let's not forget Gary Stevens.
If I was running a horse in the Breeders' Cup this week, Gary Stevens would be my jockey probably.
Yeah, it's hard to go against Gary.
Any number of those guys.
I'll take Mike Smith.
Yeah, well, he's pretty good.
That guy can win a Breeders' Cup race or two.
But isn't that what's so special, too, about the Breeders' Cup? I mean, we're bringing a collection of the world's best of the horses, trainers, and jockeys here to compete on the one stage, and so that's what's so special about all of this. But I think there is a certain home field advantage for some of these guys because there is some uniqueness. It's not to say that other guys aren't going to be able to handle it, but
yeah,
it's a little bit of an edge.
Yeah. You want that jock that knows like where to move,
sure,
and how you can split horses here, which way horses are going to drift
yep.
in or out, or and it really does help. I think it helps in a lot of races, and some turf courses are unique, like Keeneland. I think a guy like Robbie Alvarado is sometimes preferred to a guy that rides out of town. Even a great jockey that rides out of town doesn't know the nuances of the Keeneland turf course like Robbie Alvarado does.
That's always a hot topic when we come to the Belmont Stakes every year, and of course that's a racetrack that's so massive, 1.5 miles in circumference at Belmont Park, and we've heard that jockeys can get lost on that racetrack and not make the move at the right time if they're not familiar with the way that the track is laid out. And I've always maintained, and I've asked jockeys this question, and Jeff, you can answer it as a former rider. I've always said, no, wait a minute. An eighth pole is an eighth pole. A 16th pole is a 16th pole. A quarter pole is a quarter pole. What's different? I mean, it doesn't change with the circumference of the track, does it?
No, but in your head it does. And let me tell you something. Belmont, not altogether different from the uniqueness of Del Mar and its tighter turns and short stretch, is different. You're right. A mile is a mile. 3/8 is 3/8. but they're in different locations. And also, horses are accustomed to making moves in certain places just based on how they train, where they move from, which pole. And so those things do matter. And Belmont in particular, especially in such a pressure-packed situation like that, every rider is going to be inclined to move sooner than they should. You just don't realize how sweeping those turns are and how much time you're going to have going down that stretch. And so, look, you get used to it, but the reality is the more experience, the more seasoned you are in those situations, the better.
Yeah, and you know, in big races too, riders always have a tendency to move early.
Sure.
Because they want to win just as much as you want to cash your ticket. And they're trying to win that race, and they always, it seems like to me, move early. And it's the guy, one of the reasons Mike Smith does so well is he is the most patient jockey, I think, now. He's
Sits
a guy.
Delahousse.
Yeah, he just sits there and sits there and sits there, and then he fires. So you get a guy like that that's so patient and can wait and has the temperament to do it. It's a big edge, and that's why Mike Smith wins so many stakes.
Yeah, no jockey in the history of the Breeders' Cup has won more races than Mike Smith. He's won 25 Breeders' Cup events, including 3 victories in last year's Breeders' Cup at Santa Anita. He'll be seeking, how about this, guys, a 5th win in the Breeders' Cup Classic this year when he hops aboard Arrowgate, the defending champion. And that I was actually going to throw out a trivia question and ask people to chime in as to if they could name the other 4 Breeders' Cup winners for Mike Smith. But Google now, you can Google it in about 30 seconds. So I don't trust people. I think that that wouldn't go over too well. So here you go. So he won it with Skip Away in 97. That was his first win in the Classic. Came back with Zenyatta in 2009. In 2011, he won it with Drosselmeyer and then Arrowgate last year. How about that?
That's fantastic. Just think of those horses.
Just think about that, right?
Thanks for Drosselmeyer,
well,
Mikey.
The one that surprised me, well, the one I had forgotten about with Mike Smith was Skip Away. I forgot that he rode
so
Skip Away
long
in that
ago.
Classic. Yeah, right.
Who can remember that far?
Well, I don't know how often he rode Skip Away either. We could go back and look up the past performances, but I know Shane Sellers was riding Skip Away in most of his starts.
My favorite Skip Away story is the fact that Carolyn Hine had the picture of Skip Away in her wallet, but none of Sonny.
Well, Sonny didn't win the Breeders' Cup Classic. Great stuff. All right, again, this is the first of 4 Breakfast at Breeders' Cup shows we're going to bring you. The next one tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern, and then Wednesday and Thursday morning as well. And then Friday and Saturday, you can catch us for exclusive radio coverage of every single Breeders' Cup race. A complete broadcast schedule is on our website, horseracingradio.net. And don't forget, you can also watch the races on NBC. And if you can't get to the TV, we'll have you covered on the radio side and online. As a matter of fact, listeners in 170 countries have made the Horse Racing Radio Network their home for racing coverage. Make sure that you do the same, all at horseracingradio.net. Guys, the Breeders' Cup Classic, the percentage of winning favorites, not as strong as some races, 9 for 33. The shortest price winner was Cigar in 1995 and American Pharaoh in 2015, the Triple Crown winner. The highest priced winner of the Breeders' Cup Classic would be
Arkong.
There you go. Back in 1993, $269.20 for a $2 win bet.
Will that happen again this year?
Will there be a coronation or chaos in the Breeders' Cup Classic? Right? Of course, I mean, we are talking about, let's think about that for a minute, guys. I mean, Arrowgate was the horse, right? There was talk earlier this year.
Best
After
horse.
Arrowgate, maybe best horse of all time, right? People were talking about him being maybe better than Secretariat and Man o' War and any other great horse you can name. Arrowgate was at the top of a lot of people's lists, and then all of a sudden he comes out and throws in a couple of subpar efforts by Arrowgate standards and is beaten in his last 2, and now we're left with thinking, okay, can he at least redeem himself here and defend his title? That's what it's come down to now with Arrowgate, which earlier this year you would have never thought that.
Yeah, not that long ago, that would have been the conventional thought process there. You know, look, it adds drama, and we want that. Certainly, Gunrunner is even if, let's say, Arrogate hadn't sort of stubbed his toe, so to speak, and run a couple of clunkers by Arrogate standards, Gunrunner, with what he's done and with how much he's improving, would have made it interesting anyways. But now with the fact that, Arrogate has to, say, redeem himself and prove himself again, Gunrunner, the likely favorite probably, wouldn't you say, considering everything that's happened in the last couple of months?
I think he's going to be, but I don't think he necessarily deserves to be. He's never beaten Arrogate, right?
Until this Saturday, maybe.
Yeah, he has not gotten past Arrogate.
Not yet.
You remember we asked Florent Giroux that question at Saratoga, and I said, look, Florent, if you win, I believe it was maybe the Whitney, I think was the race that we were interviewing him for, and I said, if you win the Whitney, and after knowing what's happened with Arrogate, are you the rider of the number one horse in the country? And Florent was great. He says, well, considering we've never gotten past Arrogate yet, he said, I don't think you can say that. Right? So I don't think you can make that statement until he beats Arrogate.
Yeah.
The good thing about it is they're both running against each other, so we'll have an answer to that question. They're running against each other on Saturday, so we'll see what happens.
My question is, who has Gunrunner beaten?
Well, a lot of horses.
A lot of horses. Very good, Jeff.
So you're saying
but the fields he's beaten are not tremendously stellar, in my opinion.
Well, he's going to have his chance to turn the table, so to speak, because he did get beat pretty easily in the World Championship or the World Cup when he ran against Arrogate. He didn't get a chance to run against him in the Pegasus, which was unfortunate.
Yeah, he's 0 for 2 against Arrogate.
Yeah, but it makes it interesting. Look, we have drama this year that we thought we weren't going to have.
Yeah.
But only because Arrogate has gotten beat by some horses that you could say about those horses, who have they beaten? Yet they beat Arrogate. So it makes it interesting.
Collected beat Arrogate by a half. Collected is
saying,
arguably one of the best horses.
So if you like Arrogate, do you love Collected?
I think you have
Jude
to
does.
like Collected.
Right. He does.
Okay.
Well, he beat Arrogate.
Will he beat Arrogate?
No, I said he beat Arrogate.
He beat Arrogate.
So again, that's the great debate.
Yeah.
So coming back to Jude's point about Gunrunner not really beating much in those races this year, right? I guess it's the way I look at it. It's kind of like college football, right? Where if Alabama plays a Division II school, right, and they beat them by 50 or 60 or 70 like they're supposed to, well, Alabama did what they were supposed to do, right? They're Alabama. It doesn't take anything away from them. They beat them the way they're supposed to. So Gunrunner hasn't been racing against much, in Jude's opinion, but he's won by, 7 lengths, 5 lengths, and then 10 lengths last time out. So he's drubbed the competition and maybe could have won by more if they really asked him to run, right?
Well, against those crows that he's been running against.
Yeah, he did what he was supposed to do.
Well, what else can he do? That's
no, I'm not
saying
saying
beat who's in front of him.
I mean, that's who he ran against.
I give horses full credit for winning. If you're supposed to win, and you win, that's full credit. But in the overall scheme of things, if you look at those two horses and the competition that they faced, because I think Collected would have beaten all if Gunrunner was out of the picture, I think Collected would have beaten all the fields that Gunrunner beat.
He may have, but
that's my opinion.
Who
knows?
That's how,
that's how. And that the race where Arrogate ran second to Collected here, it was a weird race. He fell back on the turn.
Oh, it was a very weird race.
He was acting greenly. I mean, he could have easily won that race.
And he still ran.
And then everybody would have said, "Oh, Arrogate's back," right? So I don't know. I just
I think we did hear a little bit about Arrogate is back in that race though, because he kind of had weird things happen and he still ran really well. Did he dominate? No. Did he win? No. He almost did. But at least we saw him back compared to what he did in the previous start.
All right, let me throw this out there just for fodder. Okay, Arrogate has only lost 3 times in his entire career. The first one coming in his maiden race at Los Al, right?
Yeah.
His other 2 defeats came right here at Del Mar. So he's raced 3 times here. He only has 1 win out of those 3 efforts here at Del Mar. Is he a horse that just doesn't like this surface? He's not the same Arrogate over this racetrack.
Clearly, he didn't enjoy this surface during the summer meet. I can say that he looks like he's training really well for Arrogate. You know, in other words, it looks like he's back. I mean, he's training kind of the way he did before he went on that crazy tear of success, including winning the Pegasus.
But not
race.
Training here, training at Santa Anita, where he's always looked good.
Yeah, but these tracks are somewhat similar. They're closer to I think they're close. They're more similar now than they were before, maybe, if that's a fair statement to make. Does he love this track? No, we've seen that he doesn't love this track, but he's a good horse, and he should be able to handle it based on the way he's training. I think it's an interesting race. We have some very good handicap horses running against each other, and that's the whole thing. We've got some good drama.
I'll give you one more thing, okay? So, Rally Cry, Neolithic, Keen Ice, Breaking Lucky, Honorable Duty, Hawakim, and Shaman Ghost, none of those horses are entered in the Classic. And those are all the horses that, not one of those horses, now some of them have gotten injured and been retired and whatever, but not one is in the Classic. So that's how I'm going to end my point.
About Gunrunner. Yeah.
That he's not a good horse? Or
No,
that he hasn't beat anybody?
He hasn't beaten anybody, and he didn't beat anybody that even entered in the race.
So he still has something to prove.
He's beaten,
I think he still has something to prove.
He's beaten some good horses. There's no question about it. But he does have, he's running in the Classic. He does have something to prove because he's running against horses like Collected
let's say
and
that,
Arrogate.
okay, just for argument's sake, Gunrunner and Arrogate, they both get beat. Who's the most likely winner?
Collected.
Who beat Arrogate last
I don't
time
know
out?
about that.
Yeah.
I don't know about
Who do you
that.
think is the most likely winner?
I think Gunrunner is the horse to beat.
Well, obviously you've been backing him like a lawyer.
Well, we've been talking about that race, and Gunrunner's the horse I like.
Okay, yeah, okay. So
that's the horse.
But he said if neither one won,
Right.
who would you pick? Well, you don't have to do it.
How about
I
the
mean,
three?
We'll get back to it tomorrow. Well, you study up tonight, and we'll get back
How
to it
about the
tomorrow.
3-year-old West Coast? Right, he's emerged. Is he the top
so
3-year-old in the country now?
That's who I was
He
going
has
to
be.
I was going to jump right to it and say West Coast really is an intriguing upset play if you're going to throw those horses out that we talked about. That's
Right.
probably my go-to sort of, hey, this horse is really intriguing here.
A lot of upside there.
A lot of upside. And look, Bob Baffert, he knows how to win races like this. And this horse, so that's a very intriguing horse. Look, I love the race. Whereas if you would have said a few months ago the Breeders' Cup Classic is going to be a really interesting betting race and there's all different ways it could play out, you just said, well, you're crazy because Arrogate looked like he was impossible to beat. But that's not so much the case anymore.
Yeah, this 3-year-old division this year has taken so many twists and turns. We saw the 3 separate winners of each of the Triple Crown races, and then we came to the Travers, and all those horses were back in the Travers together, and we said, okay, this is a race that's going to determine the 3-year-old champion, and especially people were expecting one of those 3 to jump up and win the race. Well, it didn't happen. West Coast came in for Bob Baffert and smoked everybody, right? So now West Coast went to the head of the class, but people were still saying, okay, if he's going to be in the conversation for a 3-year-old championship, he still has to do more.
Yeah.
Well, he's done that. So I guess is West Coast now the leading contender for the 3-year-old championship honors without having won one of those Triple Crown races?
Unless Oscar Performance wins a mile and a half.
Well, there you go. Will Oscar
wrench in
Performance
the,
get enough votes if he were able to do that?
I don't know
Maybe?
because Americans aren't that keen on turf horses, but if Oscar Performance is the 3-year-old that wins a Breeders' Cup over older, with the body of his work this year, he's pretty darn good.
Yeah,
it's definitely a mixed bag for like no other, right?
Yeah.
In recent years.
This is as wide open a
It very much
3-year-old
is.
picture as I
Sure.
can remember in a long time. But I think in terms of the 3-year-old dirt horses, I think West Coast has gone right to the head of the class because he's now been the most consistent, right? Whereas everybody
Clearly.
else seems to be putting in a good effort, and then they take a step back. And look, you don't have any of the 3 Triple Crown race winners here at all, right? So there you go.
Yeah.
I mean, West Coast is the horse to beat right now in that category. And if you run second in the Breeders' Cup Classic, I still think that's probably enough. People will say, wow, he ran second to Arrogate or second to Gunrunner.
I don't disagree with you on that.
I think
Sure.
so. I think so.
It's like watching a tennis match.
A lot of questions. Back forth, right? A lot of questions. They're all going to be answered coming up Friday and Saturday in the 34th Breeders' Cup World Championships here at Del Mar. And we'll remind you one more time that you can catch us right here tomorrow morning, 7 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Eastern, with the Breakfast at the Breeders' Cup program. Of course, we'll combine forces with our radio show, which is the Breeders' Cup Countdown Show. And you'll hear all that tomorrow. We'll have more insight as to the horses that are training on the racetrack. We'll also go ahead and bring you a few interviews throughout the morning tomorrow and some more analysis of some of these major races coming up. 13 championship races Friday and Saturday. Should be a lot of fun.
A lot of fun.
Yeah, as always.
Been waiting for this for a long time.
Who's the shortest price favorite, by the way?
Dre Fong?
Dre Fong.
Yeah.
Dre
But
Fong,
what about
maybe.
Bolt Doro? I'm hearing a lot about Bolt Doro, too.
Yeah, he's a big Del Mar horse. The local
Yeah.
fans will be all over.
And deservingly,
He's a good
deserving
horse.
favorite. But
Very good
I think Dre Fong will end up being the
Yeah, Unique
biggest
Bella?
favorite.
No?
Yeah, she's
Close,
got a
close.
chance. She's got a
I mean,
chance.
rightly so.
They're all pretty.
I agree,
pretty
though.
salty.
I think it's going to be Dre Fong in the
Yeah.
Breeders' Cup Sprint. I think, and he's going to be pretty salty. It'll be tough to knock him off his perch there in the Breeders' Cup Sprint. But again, all those questions going to be answered Friday and Saturday, and you can go ahead and hear all those races with us here on the Horse Racing Radio Network. We'll encourage you to visit our website, horseracingradio.net, and also head over to breederscup.com for all your Breeders' Cup information and continue to watch us each of the next few mornings. Thanks for being with us here this morning. You've been watching Breakfast at the Breeders' Cup, live from Del Mar.